Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone else out there, welcome back to another episode of the Baekfast Club, a current podcast hosted by yours truly, where we go over some VGC stuff. I mean, this is more of a talk show, but I'll leave it up to you to decide that. So, I actually wasn't going to originally record one for this month because I thought that I'd be able to cover all of the regionals and all the events that are happening in 1 month from May to June till the end of the regionals for Regulation I, which I think was the final one being in the first week of June for the Italian special event. But then I looked over like the first 2 weeks of the regionals, and oh my goodness, there were a lot more events than I expected. So I don't think I can cover that long of a topic in a month span video. So we are going to be going over the first 3 weeks of the format because a lot has happened. We are going over like 8 or 9 events basically that has gone through the first 3 weeks. We still have a few couple of regionals left. And yeah, it's going to be an action-packed episode. So make sure that you have your food, grab some snacks, grab your drinks, because we have a bit of a long one today. And yes, Regulation I has really it has been like a train. It has been like, instead of like the slow train you would imagine from like your normal city transit, to a Tokyo Shinkansen, the express train, because this format has been rushing at a fast pace. And I don't even really know where to start, but actually, no, I do, because I plan these topics ahead of time. But again, this is an experimental talk show, so if you do enjoy these kinds of, well, videos, I suppose, let me know in the comments down below, because it really does help out. Any feedback you'd love to give to the show, make sure you leave a like down below, because it really does help out. And yes, so let me just ask the viewers one question today, and is, did you have any food to start off your day? Although I don't know if you are watching this in the morning, the evening, or the night, I have not eaten yet. Even though, well, technically I am recording this at like 11 a.m. my time. So I don't normally eat till like later in the day. So I don't normally eat. Again, kind of ironic thing because that's how the show works. But yeah, so let me know in the comments down below as well. But let us get started. And I think right before we get started with all the regionals, because there are a lot of them, let's open up with some quick headliners. So if you don't know, for those of you who are planning on going to a regional, or maybe the North American International Championship, or maybe you are competing in a nationals coming up, just as a quick note that you are not allowed to use the Switch 2 at tournaments. And the Switch 2 does release only in a couple of weeks from this video. I think it's like coming out in 2 weeks from time. So that is kind of insane to me that we are going to have the Switch 2. There's supposed to be like a performance patch for Scarlet and Violet coming out the same day as well. It's kind of unfortunate we're not going to be able to get the Switch 2, but I do understand why we're not allowed to use it, because of the fact that a lot of the tournament docks that were compatible with the original Switch aren't going to be compatible with Switch 2 as far as my knowledge understands. So they have to figure out like how they are going to be able to implement like Switch 2. Maybe Switch 2 won't be allowed to be used in the Scarlet Violet era. We'll just have to wait and see. So anyone who's picking up a Switch 2, make sure you don't transfer your data, your save data to that, or I guess be willing to transfer it back and forth, because you will need it on a Switch 1 if you are planning on competing in Scarlet Violet until further notice. So a quick headliner there. And let me just say, there are some pretty interesting things happening in the city of Utah, Salt Lake City, when it comes to Pokemon. So let us take a quick look at a viral VGC post, which I thought was pretty hilarious. So we have found a way to make Grimmsnarl fun for everyone involved. And obviously you have Thunderwave, always a fun time facing Thunderwave Grimmsnarl, one of the most competitive moves in the game. And then you have Metronome, and Metronome is actually kind of a status move, so it actually does take advantage of Prankster. So use Metronome, and then apparently you get to roll a Horn Drill in tournament to win a game. And the same time someone tweets out that they lost to this Grimmsnarl that clicked Metronome, which became Horn Drill, and it connected. So, man, let me just say, I don't think I've ever lost to Metronome in tournament before, but I think we should pour one out to Asthmatic. We should pour one out because I don't know if I was going to my first Pokemon tournament and I lost my chance of top cutting the event. I think this was a cup, if I'm not mistaken, which is like a mid-season showdown. I think it's like a decent local. I think it's one of the higher locals, if I'm not mistaken, or tier wise. But yeah, if I lost to a metronome clicking horn drill, granted it's not best of one. If this was best of one, this was just like classic back in the day kind of BS. But losing this in best of three with open team sheet, I might have quit the game. This channel might not have existed. So thought it was a funny, but in all jokes aside, I thought like, yeah, locals are this kind of thing where people like to have fun and sometimes it's just not fun for everyone. So just be prepared. All right, now let us get started with the 8 events that we will be covering in today's episode. It is going to be a long one, but yeah, some funny headlines to get into the start. We have the first event of Regulation I, the only regional championship that happened in the first weekend of May, the Milwaukee Regional Championship, where we are going to kick things off. And there was a pretty action-packed event at this one. The stream was actually really good. And let me just say, there were a lot of fun things to watch for. So what team ended up winning the event? And this was a team crafted by Andrew Ding, Carson Comfey. They both used the same team to finish first and fourth place. This team was also brought and created and used by this group alongside Shiliang Tang, who finished in day 2. I think went 8-3, if I'm not mistaken, at this event. And Justin Tang, who I believe was knocked out in day 1. And they ended up using the core of Miraidon Lunala, which is a very solid core at the start of this format. And of course, ended up using the Electric Seed Lunala. So we actually have the full paste here of this team. And yeah, not too surprising here. We have Electric Seed Lunala, Moonblast for the coverage, just able to do a lot with the Terra Fairy, great defensive type. We have a Choice Band Urshifu with Incineroar, just able to be very threatening as a wall breaker. The screens with Grimmsnarl, which is really solid. And as I mentioned in the first episode of the Baekfast Club, that some Miraidons were changing, right? We did note that Miraidons, a lot of them in Regulation G were running choice specs, and they were pretty much all choice specs. However, not every Miraidon in Regulation I has been running choice specs, and they have been, switching up some items here and there and testing out the different waters, because of course, being able to do that much damage with a choice specs Miraidon is really dopamine hit, threatening, heavy damage. Just nuke something, the Volt Switch, like it's not really too punishing. If you click Volt Switch, you get a good amount of damage regardless. And yeah, but this one ended up being a completely different set. And actually at this tournament, we did note that some of the Miraidons did change items. So for instance, the Miraidon here on this team is opting for the Assault Vest. And Assault Vest Miraidon is really interesting here, but it makes sense because you have the electric terrain again to activate the electric seed on Lunala. You're able to get the defense boost with Lunala, get rid of the item on Lunala, so it's not taking as much damage from a knockoff from opposing Incineroar. And with this Miraidon set, you're able to tank hits pretty well, especially with the screen support. This is a very bulky Miraidon running the Snarl set, which is able to punish opposing Miraidon as well as hit Shadow Rider through its Focus Sash, which is pretty nice. And it is still pretty fast mon. However, this one opting for just maximum bulk because you are running screens, as well as a lot of special attack because you aren't running that choice spec. So you do need to still want to do a ton of damage through the screen, so you aren't exactly trading weak hits. So just a really strong Miraidon running the Terra Electric because you're not running Dazzling Gleam. It's a still good defensive type because you get rid of a lot of weaknesses, and the only weakness you do have is ground, while powering up your electric type moves. And Terra Electric, Electro Drift, even without the choice specs, will still do a ton of damage into opponents. So really unique set here with the Assault Vest Miraidon paired with the Electric Seed Lunala, opting for the screens on the Grimmsnarl, a really defensive Incineroar, and the Ursaluna, which has picked up a lot and we'll be going over later. But Ursaluna was a pretty big staple in this tournament in general. We saw a lot of Lunalas on stream. It will do well. We didn't actually see too much of the Urshifu, but I imagine Urshifu was still going to be good in some matchups, especially I imagine it'd be really good into Terrapago stuff, where this team with Lunala, Miraidon, with the Turtle with Calm Mind can be a bit hard to stop, especially if it's really physically defensive of Intimidate. Having a Choice Band Urshifu being able to wall break like a lot of defensive things like that Turtle, where Miraidon Lunala might be struggling, or any Calm Mind sets in general, could be very nice for that kind of matchup. But that is the Milwaukee Regional Championship team. And then the second place, we actually have the Calyrex Ice Rider Miraidon, which I said is been not the greatest. At least my initial impressions were pretty weak. However, I feel like it's been getting better. I think the builds have been getting stronger. And this one also following the trend of no choice specs on the Miraidon, and actually opting for a very interesting item in the Choice Scarf. And Choice Scarf Miraidon, you might be thinking, why would you run Choice Scarf Miraidon? It is already a really fast Pokemon with a base 135 speed. However, consistency, being able to outspeed every of those that aren't the Choice Scarf, can just allow you to make some safer options. The fact that you can punish Shadow Rider, the fact that it could be a really good endgame cleaner in general, just because with that Choice Scarf, you pretty much just outspeed anything in the format. Able to drop the Draco Meteors against opposing Miraidon, fast Volt Switch, or fast Snarl, which can actually be very nice. It's just a way to be able to help out against any opposing Miraidon, because for real, like, this is the first event of the season. There are people running max speed Miraidon to incredibly bulky Miraidons. Pretty much don't know what you're going to be expecting here for this first tournament, because everyone is just trying out what they thought was the best call here. So this Choice Scarf Miraidon able to play around any choice specs Miraidon, because you don't care if they're max speed and have to go for a speed tie. You don't care if they're bulky. You just threaten it immediately with that Draco Meteor. And then Volcarona able to do really well as a redirection. It was actually a really good mon on stream, was able to pretty much just protect the Calyrex Ice Rider and go for a lot of damage with pretty much supports that we have commonly see in this format. So yeah, otherwise we saw pretty similar stuff with the Miraidon and the Lunala once again. And let me just say, Miraidon, of course, being one of the most popular Pokemon in this regional, really. Like, there were 7 Miraidons in Top Cut. And that's not really a surprise when you look at the stats of Miraidon. Like, it has really good bulk. It has a pretty good special attack. It's not like crazy for restricted, but base 135 is really solid for a mon. But then you have the multipliers with the electric terrain, plus the special attack boost that I guess from the Hadron engine, and then also including like something like a choice specs on top potentially. It's just an absolutely absurd Pokemon. So yeah, not too surprising. We saw a lot of Ursaluna do pretty well. We saw a lot of Iron Hands as well. Of course, Iron Hands and Miraidon, pretty standard combination. We saw a rise, and who probably was one of the biggest, how would I say this? One of the biggest stars, I think, at this tournament, Mr. Joey Pokeaim MD. And let me just say, I was really hype. I really wanted to see Joey do really well this regional, and I knew he could. If you don't know, he has downplayed like, oh, he's gonna go 08, and I kept telling him to shut up. He's gonna make day 2. I could see him in Top Cut, and yeah, he ended up doing really well. He had really impressive stream matches. He played pretty well for the matches that he was showcased on, and yeah, he brought a really cool team that featured Iron Treads, which is, of course, when there are this many Miraidons in a tournament, and there are definitely a ton more. The fact that that Iron Treads we saw at UIC 2025 earlier this year, the fact that you are able to pressure any kind of opposing Miraidon is really solid. And then the Ho-Oh, which has been a really cool partner with the Miraidon, because it's a Pokemon that's able to threaten the Rillaboom. And Sacred Fire Calyrex Ice Rider is super threatening as well, but Volt Switch and Regenerator is a pretty cool combination to have. Opting for the Iron Bundle that was able to have Icy Wind support, which was solid because it makes it, again, multiple answers to opposing Miraidon, which is super sick. Encore threatening is super pressure, because if you want to scout for the Miraidon what's locking into, you could get punished by the Encore Iron Bundles. And of course, a good trigger mode with the Ferrigraph and Iron Hands, and you have even more speed control with the Tailwind on your Ho-Oh, which I thought was nice. Then we have Paul with a pretty interesting build of Calyrex Ice Miraidon, opting for the Wellspring Ogerpon, being able to threaten quite a bit with the Ivy Cudgel into like Incineroar, for instance. Good redirection, helps out against Kyogre, especially the Kyogres in general, just because like the rest of the team doesn't really switch into Water Spout other than maybe Miraidon. And yeah, there isn't really too much to say. We saw Pagos here. This one's a Calm Mindset, and it does have the Encore Disable Calyx Shadow Rider with the Focus Sash acting as like a Scream Tail. I mean, this is basically that kind of team where it was the Terrapago setup teams that especially was really big in Regulation G, especially from players in Italy. Like the Calyx Shadow Rider is just being a more punishing Scream Tail, and it is able to really help support this Terrapagos here. So not too surprising to see that build. Then we saw some interesting builds. For instance, Adi was also running Ho Miraidon, opting for a Parting Shot Grimmsnarl, which I thought was really cool because it's another Parting Shot plus Volt Switch combination with the fact that you have Regenerator Ho-Oh, which also really may need multiple ways to be able to pivot into Ursaluna under Trick Room. And then, yeah, otherwise we see like Riley going with a bit of a build he's been very classic to. This is something he's been really utilizing in Regulation G to do pretty decently at his tournaments with the Toxapex Miraidon, with the Whimsicott. He really loves this Life Orb Iron Crown, or I think it was Expert Belt actually when he was using Regulation G, or he had Expert Belt at one point there, and now he's opting for Life Orb Iron Crown. He has the Expert Belt Terrapagos, which it's just a very interesting tech alongside Urshifu and Incineroar. And I felt like the biggest thing to note is that like Riley's a player who's known not for using inaccurate moves. He will use 100% accurate moves, and he has Draco Meteor this time. Like, this is the first time I've seen Riley have an inaccurate move in years. And I think like, you know, there's some points at the format where the risk reward is so high, like not having Draco Meteor or Miraidon to punish like Dundozos, gain those one shots with the Dragon type move, because Draco Meteor, like there will be Pokemon that live a Dragon Pulse with the Choice Specs and the Hadron engine boost, but Draco Meteor, if you hit, man, it's really strong. But I wouldn't be surprised if he also just had Draco Meteor as a team sheet thing, because it's like, oh, he has Draco Meteor, you got to respect it a bit more. So that's also another thing that I could see. But yeah, we saw a lot of Sun teams, like a lot of Sun teams. For instance, this team by Carl, we see a team by Colin. I think Wolf also used a Sun team, and we'll go over some of the crazier teams that we saw. But yeah, a lot of Sun. Sun was very popular, I think, in this tournament as well. The fact that Sun, I think in general, has been very popular because Koraidon picked up, especially after EUIC with Wolf's win, because Life Orb Koraidon is able to do a ton of damage. And yes, it is really threatening. You have a really good amount of support Pokemon like that Focus Sash Fluttermane that a lot of players were running this weekend. The Brew Bonnet that is picked up in usage recently towards the end of Regulation G, really able to do well with the support with Spore, Rage Powder, redirect the attacks. You have the Sucker Punch, which is able to threaten the ghost types, and then a bit of grass coverage usually with Seed Bomb. Raging Bolt, which is able to run Assault Vest or Life Orb, just dish out a ton of damage. So you do have quite a few partners that like Koraidon just absolutely loves to help, and it's still able to do a ton of damage while supporting the rest here. And yeah, we just saw a lot of Koraidons at this event. We also saw a bunch of Lunala at this event as well. Like there were a ton of different sets. For instance, there was the Electric Seed one with the Miraidon, and then we saw the Power Herb sets, mainly with Meteor Beam that's able to threaten a lot, be able to threaten Incineroar, charge up, +1 special attack, threaten a very powerful rock move, and then those Moongeist Beams will really be able to do a ton of damage. Lunala, of course, we mentioned this, it's really good, especially with Terastallization in this format, getting rid of that 4 times Dark and Ghost type weakness. It is able to really wreak havoc and really picked up towards the end of Regulation G. And it wasn't a shock that Lunala was very common at this event. Then we have like just players in general probably using things that they were mostly comfortable with in this format. For instance, we saw Riley use a team. If you had followed Riley and his results past, like this team wouldn't really shock you. Joseph Ugarte was pretty much running his same 6 from Regulation G, just running a Zamazenta over the Urshifu, and it's pretty much the same team as we commonly saw. And then maybe some surprises here and there, but Yeah, then we saw like Galarian Weezing with the Shadow Rider and the ability shield. Koraidon just be able to dish out a ton of damage. You have a really good, again, Ghost plus fighting coverage, which is fantastic synergy duo. And that Weezing be able to shut down abilities, especially like the Electric Train being summoned from the Miraidon. It does shut off Shadow Shield from Lunala, which is absolutely absurd. So Astral Barrage is able to do a ton of damage. It is a pretty strong mod, and James Evans was able to get top 16, being the best Weezing player in this tournament. And then, oh boy, Michael Zhang's crazy team. This crazy team with Walking Wake Sprite not working here, but this is one heck of a team. This is one heck of a team. So where do I even begin? We have Toxapex, which actually has been an interesting mon in the format, with Toxic Stall being able to wear down certain mons. It's really good, for instance, into like the leftover stuff like Lunala and Terapagos especially. You have Wide Guard, which there's just so much Wide Guard in this format that it just makes sense because of all the powerful spread moves out there. Baneful Bunker, it's basically a protect, but if they come into the Baneful Bunker with a contact move, they will get poisoned. Haze to get a stat increasing boost, which is nice. Then you have like the Ho-Oh, which is able to set up speed control with Tailwind for the Walking Wake and the Koraidon, a bit more of the wall breakers on the team. You have a Solvez Koraidon, which this one's really bulky if I'm not mistaken. I've heard a few players play this team on ladder, and it is a very bulky Solvez Koraidon designed to take hits and do a ton of damage. We have the Rhydon, which is able to basically, with Terra Fairy, it's really good into the Miraidons out there, because with Lightning Rod you do redirect the electric attacks into Rhydon, and you are able to punish like a Choice Specs Miraidon. They can't lock into an electric move safely against the team. You have the Terra Fairy, because if they go for Draco Meteor to try and one-shot the Rhydon so they can go for their electric type moves later in the game, you do have this Terra Fairy, which is able to really punish. And it really does help out when two Pokemon in the Toxapex and Ho-Oh, which are really hard to usually get through. Like Miraidon's one of the best Pokemon that are just stopping these two from really being able to sponge up hits. The fact that this Lightning Rod is really able to shut it down. Walking Wake, Life Orb, just able to be pretty strong with the water type coverage, especially powered up in the sun, which is a really cool tech. And then Comfey, this one running Synthesis, which you get 50% healing normally, but in sun you do get 75% healing, and then the floor healing, which gives 50% healing to a target. It is just such a unique team, and I don't believe we got to see it on stream, unfortunately, but really cool text right there. And then we see a lot of sun, we see a lot of Lunala, we see some more Miraidon, Cali Ice, we see just a few different builds, but in general, I would say the only thing that you would really note here from this tournament, other than like maybe a few crazy picks, some that were expected, the Toxapex stuff, like not really, you would say. But in general, I think a lot of the duos, like again, this is day one format basically. This was the first event of the regional. Players were just going out, trying out like they either built a specific custom team or took teams that they were comfortable with. Again, Wolf, Joe, Riley, those kind of players were using things to their consistency that they have had great success with in Regulation G, and tweaked it slightly to start off with Regulation I, because you can't really master a new format if you don't know what to prepare for, because no one really knew what to prepare for. So a lot of them were utilizing consistent teams that have general good matchup plans. For instance, like the winning team screens plus Ursaluna in Trick Room. Really hard to knock out these Pokemon under screens. It doesn't matter what team you're playing, the game plans are pretty similar. So it was a really effective call for, I think, this kind of tournament. And yeah, we see a lot of just restricted pairs that you would probably see. I think the only thing you might want to note is in this tournament, I think you might know that Calyrex Shadow Rider Zamazenta wasn't really used too much in this tournament, but I would have said I would not have expected it to be, because I think in North America specifically, with how the meta has been for Regulation G, just I think in general, North America doesn't like Calyrex Shadow Rider. I'm not exactly sure the reason why. I guess like it's a very positional mon that you kind of have to respect, because I feel like it's really hard to utilize Shadow Rider exceptionally well. In some cases, a lot of positional battles because of the fact that it's a really good mon when you can make it work with Astral Barrage and just sweeping, but you do have to be quite patient with it because of the fact that there's stuff like Incineroar, there's Grimmsnarl that's been a very common Pokemon, especially at this tournament, and yeah, there is a lot that Alex Shadow doesn't absolutely love, so it's not really a mon that I think, even in 2022, I don't think it was absolutely loved. It was definitely used more, but it's definitely not a mon I think as common as like other teams or other players like using. I think they were used to the Sun, Lunala for its consistency with being able to get Trick Room up, for instance. And yeah, even stuff like Zamazenta. Like Zamazenta was used in this event, and there are a decent amount of Zamazenta, but I don't think Zamazenta has been a big popular mon in North America compared to Europe. I know that we saw like a few Zamazentas placed in general in Regulation G, but I don't think it was like a really big common staple, I think, in our format, at least here in the States. So I'm not really surprised to not see it do too well at this event, especially when there is a ton of Sun players, especially going into this event, which the duo is all right against, but it definitely does need some respect. But otherwise, a lot of things I would say you would probably have expected. Maybe there are some surprises, like for instance, there was the Crossbow Dust main that we have showcased a recreation of this team on the channel, and yeah, there are definitely some really cool restricteds and some really cool just Pokemon that you might not expect to do well, but for some tech matchups it definitely is cool. And yeah, not really much to say. Like for instance, Raichu was used to get 84th, which is day 2. So yeah, otherwise you just see a bunch of different kind of restricted pairs. Calyrex Ice Rider, Miraidon, Lunala, Koraidon were probably the most common restricteds that you would see at this tournament. And then you saw actually a pretty fair amount of like the other restricteds, right? Like I think Kyogre and Terapagos, there were actually quite a few more than I was expecting in the higher usage stats here. So I was a bit surprised to see a bit of those. Zamazenta, a bit less than I would have expected. However, just in general, yeah, like I think a lot of the top restricted Pokemon that you would expect here were actually pretty respectable usage. Like in general, you saw like all kinds of restricted Pokemon, and Ho, I think, is the one that kind of surprised me with how much it took over this event here. Oh, and I do think we should shout out this one crazy team that players saw throughout the weekend, and like Michael Zhang and VJ Su, probably the top 2 most interesting creative teams brought to the event that actually did pretty well. So VJ Su was able to get day 2 with, I don't even understand this team. I cannot understand this team. It has Power Gem Cresselia. I didn't even know Cresselia got Power Gem until I saw this team. That is how rare it is. Like I did not know it got Power Gem with Ally Switch and Lunar Blessing. It has not even like how Gouging Fire. It is literally just a Gouging Fire. I'd imagine it's speed booster with the Burning Bulwark. Maybe it's attack booster. I don't know. We have a Wellspring Ogerpon, not a common Pokemon, although it did do okay in this event. It actually did pretty well for what it was worth. Choice Specs Terapagos, the Hisuian Zoroark, which is kind of interesting because it's able to wall Shadow Rider Calyrex's most common attack with Zamazenta, which means you're immune to the body press and you're immune to the Astral Barrage. So this is a really neat Pokemon if you're able to disguise it well. I think the only thing is like it's really hard to disguise it because the only mons you can really disguise it as, I think, is Ogerpon and Cresselia, because otherwise the abilities always give the illusion away. So that's an interesting one. And then not even the crown form Zacian, it was a Sulfaz Zacian, which I think is really, really cool with just being able to take the special attacks better. You have a Zacian with just a fairy typing, not the steel typing. It's a lot weaker, but I guess if you're not running a steel move, you have like attacks like the Psychic Fangs that's able to break screens, for instance. Crunch Hit, Shadow Rider, Sacred Sword for its really strong fighting coverage option, and then Player of, which you still get the same type of attack bonus, but it is concerning having your main attacking move be the inaccurate one, at least compared to Behemoth Blade. However, yeah, shout out to VJ Sood. But that is going to wrap up, I think, my coverage of Milwaukee, which was the only event that happened throughout the first week of May. And then we move on to the second week of May, which didn't have any regional championships, but did have two tournaments, which we are going to go over now. So I said there were three big online tournaments of the second weekend of May. No regionals, but these online tournaments were really big, especially if you are a player in Asia, because we have the Pokemon Trainers Cup, which is the qualifier for Korean Nationals. It's a ladder tour, which I think means you can only play 15 games within a certain time limit. And then the top 32, if I'm not mistaken, do qualify for Korean Nationals. We're going to go over this one first. Then we have the Japan Ladder Tour, which is the qualifier for Japan Nationals. The top 64 make it, and the only way you were making it into that tournament was through the global challenges for Japan. I think there's like 150 players, and then it gets dwindled down to top 64. And they have to do a ladder tour, again, 15 games, I'm pretty sure. Maybe it's 10, but I think it's 15 within a certain time span of the weekend. And yeah, like, oh boy. It is very important. It's best of one. It's closed team sheet. We don't really have much information on a lot of these tournaments. So let's start off with the Korean Pokemon Trainers Cup, and we don't even really have teams. Really, there's not much information that we have here. We have pretty much the names of like who qualified, and then only if you shared the team on like Twitter or social media do you have the teams. The highest placement was third place, who used a Calyrex Shadow Rider, a Focus Sash set with the, I'd assume it's Call My Terapagos because it's the leftovers. But yeah, we don't really have much information. The only reason I'm showcasing is because they do have in these tournaments like some usage stats of like, okay, what are the top picks of restricteds and overall Pokemon, which I thought were interesting here. But Korea, I feel, doesn't have the largest Pokemon scene at the moment, but they are a really strong region, so it is really interesting to note, for instance, like what the restricted mons are here. And pretty much a lot of them you would expect, right? Miraidon being the top. It's interesting to see Shadow Rider as the second one. Zamazenta going to be in third place alongside Lunala, Koraidon, Calyrex Ice Rider, and then Terapagos, Kyogre, Ho-Oh, and Zacian. I think the only thing I would have expected was Kyogre to be more than Terapagos, and maybe Calyrex Ice being a bit higher, but then again, a lot of cores with Calyrex Ice Rider are paired with Miraidon, and then Miraidon's usually split between Lunala and the Calyrex Ice Rider, so it does make a lot of sense that like these Pokemon are a bit lower usage, Miraidon being the highest usage, Shadow Rider probably being the second really strongest duo, and then Zamazenta has its own cores that I can work off with. So restricted Pokemon makes sense to me. The overall usage of like these Pokemon, like a lot of these, oh, it makes sense, like the top 20, I don't think it's surprising. Maybe Pelipper, because I'm kind of surprised Pelipper was used more than Single Strike Urshifu, because yeah, like I'm surprised that Pelipper is having usage just because its stat distribution is just really weak in general. Blood Moon or Ursaluna is really interesting to see here. And then we see like Cresselia in 23rd place. We see Glade in 26th place. And then Iron Valley in 29 and Umbreon 30. Like, I thought that was shocking. But in general, like, yeah, we can't really get too much from this, but it's just interesting to see like what mons are going to be used, like what are the most common mons. I don't think it's like the biggest like data point that we need to go over, but I just thought it was interesting. Like, for instance, that Umbreon is the 30th most used Pokemon that isn't a restricted Pokemon in this tournament. Was just, I felt like, huh, that's interesting. That's something I wanted to showcase. And then we have the Japan Ladder Tour qualifier. So this is another ladder tour that happened the same weekend, and yeah, it's got kind of same thing as Korea, but a lot of the Japan players actually share their teams, or at least the 6 mons. Sometimes they'll cover up mons in 2, and sometimes they'll like just not showcase the team at all, mainly because they'll probably be preparing similar stuff for the Japan Nationals that will be coming up, which It is also usually closed team sheet, best of one, and then it switches to like best of three. I think it really depends because the format changes every year. I'm not exactly too aware at the current moment of what the structure is for Japan Nats this year. All I know is the top 64 players do have their Worlds invite and will be fighting for the travel awards at the Japan Nationals, and of course trying to claim the title. We do have like some teams that were shared in general, but like in most cases, a lot of them are just 6 mods in general. Maybe you'll see some item changes, but they're like super rare. It's just interesting, I think, to note like what kind of restricted duos that Japan thinks are really good at the moment. So we see a few Ice Rider Kyogre was able to win the tournament. It's interesting to see Iron Treads, but you always do need an answer to Miraidon. So having Iron Treads, even on a team that doesn't rely on using Miraidon, does just make a lot of sense as a counterplay, because if you're able to get rid of Miraidon, that's just a huge relief for Kyogre and Cali Ice. So I thought this team was really cool. Then we have like Calyrex Shadow Zamazenta paired with no fire type and Dragonite, no Shi and Power Eater, which I thought was really cool. More Calyrex Ice Rider Kyogre, but it has Basket Legion this time, as Zamazenta Kyogre getting 4th place. We have this team with Dundozo Tinglu getting 5th place with the Calyrex Shadow Rider Zamazenta, and Salazzle getting 6th place on Calyrex Ice Rider Kyogre, which is just an interesting tech. I don't think we have any of the sets on this team, unfortunately, but I would have really liked to know like what does the Salazzle specifically do on this team. I wonder if it's like Poison Gas and there's like Choice Scarf Kyogre and then Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider, which I could definitely see on this kind of build, but don't really know too much to say for certain. And then I think Kyogre Cali Ice Rider has been like the most popular team that was able to do well, or the most popular duo that was able to do well. So it's really interesting to see Japan note Calyrex Ice Rider Kyogre, but Kyogre is able to threaten quite a bit. And I think Calyrex Ice Rider, we talked about, I think in the previous episode of the Baekfast Club, where Ice and Water just really good coverage in general, because a lot of things that will resist the Kyogre's moves are Dragon type Pokemon as well as the Grass types. And the Calyrex Ice Rider just be able to threaten all of those with the Glacial Lance plus Water Spout, which if you don't have Wide Guards, are really hard to switch into. It can be an absolute devastating combination to switch into. And then you see some unique stuff like Zacian Miraidon paired with the Iron Moth. You see Groudon Miraidon, and you see some more balanced stuff. You see Miraidon paired with Lunala, but it has Rillaboom with Grassy Terrain. I think it's Calm My Lunala with the Rillaboom. You have the Grassy Terrain that can just heal the Lunala, as well as be another answer to opposing Miraidon, which is always cool. And yeah, you just see like a bunch of teams if you scroll down. And I wouldn't say there's too many crazy teams that we saw in this tournament, but we saw maybe some interesting picks, like the Zamas, or not Zamazenta, the Rayquaza plus Lunala that was able to get 29th, which I thought Rayquaza, after looking at the Milwaukee Regional Championship, we did do a video. I recorded that video, I think, right before I left for Portugal. So, and it was right before this tournament came out. I thought Rayquaza was really good because there were a lot of Sun teams just going around, and I think Dragon's Descent is just such a good move right now. In general, it's just able to hit so much. So I'm not surprised that Rayquaza could do really well, and I think it has a pretty cool niche in the format where it's just able to be a decent dragon type. It's not like, oh, this is like the best dragon type, because Miraidon clearly is probably the best one, but threatens quite a bit of extreme speed. You have stuff like Tailwind, Assault Vest. It has really good coverage. Both its attack stats are base 150, which is pretty good. It's just its speed is just very awkward. Its defenses aren't amazing. But I do think Airlock is a really good one, especially with like a bunch of Weather Wars. If you notice that like Kyogre and Groudon were pretty common at this event. And if you run the Terra Normal, you are able to take on Shadow Rider and Lunala more consistently. So, and you can hit back with like Crunch and other moves that like Rayquaza gets. So I think it's actually a pretty decent mon. Like I was experimenting with Assault Vest, Rayquaza, and a few other sets, and I think the mon actually has quite a bit of potential. So I'm kind of curious to see if we'll see more of it as time goes on. We see like Assault Vest right here. This team was actually shared. It's pretty much just a Tailwind Trigger mode, but it has Assault Vest right here with Lightning Rod to be able to tank on the Miraidons, kind of similar to the Rhydon idea, with the electric terrain, or the Lightning Rod being able to absorb the Volt Switch and the Electric Drift. And yeah, it is still a pretty tanky mon with the Assault Vest, so pretty solid there. Shiftry, I wish we saw the set on the Shiftry. I really wish, because it's a really interesting team. Shiftry and Sun, you don't know. Probably Chlorophyll. You want to imagine Chlorophyll. Probably Tailwind stuff as well with this double fighting combination. And then if we just keep scrolling, I mean, it's just like these are teams or mons in general you would think we would commonly see. Some that might be surprising. We see a Tarsus Terapagos in 48th place. And this team was wild. This team is actually one I'll be sharing on the channel sometime soon because it is a public team. Actually, the information is out there. But oh man, this was a crazy stall team. And this crazy stall team in 55th place, Whirlwind Life Dew Ho-Oh with Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider alongside the T-Spike Overquill with Intimidate, Choice Band Ting Lu, and then just a Solvus Rillaboom and standard Ogerpon Wellspring. Like this team is wild, and I thought like this is actually one of my favorite teams to play. This was one of my favorite teams to play in the format. It's actually crazy how fun it is for a stall team. Like it's insane. So be sure to stay subscribed if you haven't already, because that video will be coming up in the future. But yeah, this team was really fun, and I mean really fun. And yeah, otherwise, like I think the craziest team, I mean, there's a Toxapex that qualified. There's a Toxapex that qualified as well, but I think I missed over one of the teams that I do know. What it was, the Entei King Gambit, which I don't know why I can't find it right now, but there. Oh yeah, this team was also shared. It's crazy. This had like, if I'm not mistaken, it was Choice Specs Lunala with Choice Scarf Entei, with Terrafire Eruption, Endeavor Focus Ash Whimsicott, Room Service King Gambit. I think this Raging Bolt was Life Orb, Max Special Attack, Max Speed, and the Groudon, I think was Cobra Cloak. If I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's Cobra Cloak Groudon on this team. I do feature this. I also recorded a video with this team as well, so it'll be coming up on the channel if it isn't up already. I don't know when the videos will be uploaded compared to this episode of the Baekfast Club, trying to get it out before Portland. But yeah, it like there's some wild teams, and then there are just like some teams you would like, okay, I could see those mons working together and it makes sense. And then you will probably, there are some items and move slot and Terra choices that just blow our minds because of how best of one closed team sheet works. And unfortunately, a lot of the texts are just not shared, but it does make sense because these are the players who qualified, and these are the players who are working really hard for Japan Nationals to try and get the travel award and of course claim the victory title. Finally, the last tournament of the weekend was the Grand Challenge. So a quick note for anyone who doesn't know the difference, there are two types of tournaments in the Western world for online tournaments, which is the Grand Challenge and the Global Challenge. The Global Challenge is North America, Europe, basically all TPCI regions alongside Asia, where Asia will compete as well. Usually it's meant for the championship points, but also for Asia, it's usually how they qualify for their ladder tours. Because the ladder tours have happened this weekend as well, they are playing that ladder tournament, which is a separate tournament. So we have the Grand Challenge, which is just basically all the TPCI regions for CP. Think about North America, think about Europe, think about Latin America, and some parts of Oceania. So yes, this is the Grand Challenge, which means it excludes regions like Japan and Korea, for instance. And we don't really have much information, unfortunately, about this because it wasn't really super shared out information-wise. Like there are some teams that you could probably go over and find out like what the six are, but yeah, again, not really too much information here. Not much is really showcased. There was a stream for it, which I actually didn't know until like I was in Portugal. I checked my Twitch tab real quick, and then I just see like, oh, this is a thing, because I didn't know this was a thing until I was in Portugal. I was just scrolling through my phone real quick on Twitch just to see, and then I see this. I'm like, huh, I didn't know that was happening. So that was there. If you want to know, the team that ended up winning this Grand Challenge was actually the same team that won the Milwaukee Regional Championship, or at least the same six. It's pretty much similar, right? You have the Miraidon, Lunala, Incineroar, Urshifu Water, or Assume Water. We don't know if it's water or dark. The Ursaluna and the Grimmsnarl. Only thing to note is there are a few slight item changes, maybe some moveset and terror choices as well. Toxapex Miraidon was used over the Assault Vest. We saw the Assault Vest Incineroar instead of the Rocky Helmet, and then we saw the Cobra Cloak on the Grimmsnarl. Really good in best of one generally, so especially close team sheets. So it does make sense having some changes, because some players will be like, oh, is this the same team from Milwaukee that won, and we'll play accordingly to that. And then some players will be very suspicious, right? So you could always catch them a bit off guard by changing a few of the items. And I mean, the 6 are still really good with like all the tools that these Pokemon just generally have. It's pretty consistent in general. Especially, I don't know if the Grimmsnarl still screens, but if it is, it still makes a ton of sense. Could be like a fake out set. Not really too sure. But yeah, it's not really like too much of a surprise that this 6 could still do really well in the Grand Challenge format. But yeah, that is the second week of the Regulation I. So we had the first week, which was Milwaukee, then 3 online tournaments for the second week. And now we get to a doozy of tournaments, because we have 4 in-person tournaments for the third week. So it was just a couple of days ago where there were 4 tournaments throughout the same weekend. Oh man, let's get started, I suppose. First, we have the Utrecht Special event. This was the regional level like tournament in Europe, and yeah, we have the winner being Michael Kausch, who ended up winning the second regional championship he's competed in a row. Absolutely absurd. I think that's his 3rd regional level win at this point. And yes, had a really strong performance. And he actually did share his team, so we can go over it real quick. And this is the team. It was very similar, but in some cases different to the team we saw in Milwaukee. He said he ended up changing the team with a few friends, like I think Friday, like last minute. So that can happen sometimes. But we see the Grimmsnarl and Incineroar combination, a few changes with the Assault Vest Incineroar over the Rocky Helmet Incineroar that Andrew, Shelian, Carson, and Justin used. This is pretty good offensively, especially because of the fact that you have great offensive coverage. Punishes Rillaboom on the switch, which is nice. And actually opting for the Jolly Max Speed Incineroar. And we've seen Jolly Max Speed Incineroar do well in some cases. A lot of players are just used to the really bulky Incineroars, of course, because Incineroar is usually designed to be able to be a mod that sponges up hits, right? But there, in some cases, there are quite a few reasons to bring out a fast Incineroar. And for instance, I believe that UIC back in, I think it was 2023 or 2024. It was 2024. It was 2024 when Nils Dunlop ended up winning with Porygon 2 and a very fast Incineroar on that team. And I think it was also Jolly, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it was Max Speed, but I know it was a really fast Incineroar. And yeah, so fast Incineroar has done well at actually quite a few events. Not as common as the slow bulky one, but it kind of makes sense to have a fast Incineroar on this kind of team. You're able to punish like the really slow Rillabooms, have the faster fake out, which could have a bit of potential because it does give you a bit of a surprise with like, oh, you could go for Flare Blitz into the Rillaboom, because a common way to stop Miraidon, especially the Toxapex Miraidon, from wreaking havoc is leading Rillaboom. So if you lead something like a Miraidon plus Incineroar combination, you will go for the Intimidate before the grassy terrain. Usually you get the Scout for the fact, and then you have fast fake out against Rillaboom, or you have double up potential because you also have the Volt Switch, so you can reset your terrain, plus like a Flare Blitz combination double up that can threaten the Rillaboom and knock it out in a combination. So that is a reason why you could really threaten the Rillabooms. And because of the fact that you have the Assault Vest, you have the screens, you have the Intimidate, you have all these defensive factors, you don't have to rely on having a really bulky Incineroar that could just be, it might be overkill to have that much bulk into Incineroar that is sponging up the hits, but maybe not doing nearly as much as it needs to do in that kind of field. Because your Assault Vest, you can get attacks off, you can go for fast knockoffs, you can get a faster U-turn, you can get a faster fake out, Flare Blitz threatening, and outspeed some of the Pokemon in that speed tier can be really useful. So that's the reason why instead of the fast Urshifu Rapid Strike that we saw on the Milwaukee team, it ended up being a slower defensive Urshifu, which I do understand because it takes advantage of the light screen. And if you just notice about this team, it's just really bulky, right? You have a very bulky, and I mean very bulky Miraidon. Like, this Miraidon is able to sponge up attacks. It only has 36 special attack from Modest Nature, but when you have the choice effects and the electric terrain, it just makes sense because it still does a ton of damage. But you have a lot of special defense to be able to take attacks. You have the Intimidate and the Reflect to help out physical defensive side. Like, this thing will take hits and threaten a lot of damage at the same time. Same with the Urshifu, able to help out its weaker special defense stat. And even the Landers was bulky too. Like, the fact that it had no speed, the rest was just going to special defense. It was able to tank an Astral Barrage Life Orb with, I think it only took 60% from a Calyrex Shadow Rider in finals, which that's kind of absurd when you think about it. Life Orb Shadow Rider Astral Barrage only doing 60% to Landorus with no screen up is insane. And then you also have the Ice Rider tech, and the Ice Rider has been picking up in usage. I'll talk more about it in a bit, but we do have Leech Seed Ice Rider, which was pretty popular at this event, and it is a tech that has been has been around for a bit in Regulation I in general since the start. However, started picking up in tournament officially at this event. So players were running Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider, and this one just running an absurd amount of special defense. But of course, Shadow Rider is something you have to worry about. Opposing Miraidon you have to worry about. And again, with Intimidate support, you generally are pretty good on the physically defensive side. So that was a team that ended up winning Utrecht. Michael was able to play really well on stream too. And congrats to him on another regional championship, because, man. Then we have things like the Shadow Rider Calyrex and the Zamazenta placing in the second place, and it was actually close. If you didn't watch the finals, actually, this could have actually been a win. There was a little bit of a misplay on this side where there was a position where they went straight for Helping Hand and a +5 Astral Barrage with the Calyrex Shadow Rider, and I believe it was a guarantee win if instead the Shadow Rider had Protect and could use Protected on that turn. Incineroar can knock off Michael's Incineroar's Assault Vest, and then Helping Hand Astral Barrage would have been able to just sweep the entire team because it was +5 with Life Orb, and it was able to KO Grimmsnarl, and it would have KO'd Incineroar through that light screen and cleaned up whatever in the back as well. So a bit of a missed opportunity, but finals, playing on stream, all of that can really affect it mental wise. So it is a bit of a shame. However, it was a play that could have happened there. So Helping Hand Calyrex Shadow Rider, super threatening, not opting for the Willis option that we commonly see on Incineroar, but it makes sense. It is just able to power up for some really powerful KOs because you can lead stuff like Incineroar plus Shadow Rider. You have to fake out Nasty Plot or to fake out Astral, and you could threaten the Helping Hand Astral. It is a very strong hit regardless. You do also have pretty standard tools: the Choice Scarf, Urshifu, the Follow Me Redirection, Ogre Pond Heartflame with the Grassy Glide. I think this Grassy Glide came in clutch with the Mold Breaker because it was able to hit a Kyogre, I think, and ignore if like a Serena came in with a Grassy Glide because of Mold Breaker. So that's really neat. Standard Assault Vest, Rillaboom, and then Standard Zamazenta. Like, this is just a balance core that was very common, especially with Shadow Rider. Like, this 5 was very common in Regulation G, especially used at the World Championship. Usually the last Pokemon would be like a Raging Bolt, for instance. I think Zamazenta was generally Raging Bolt as the last mod, maybe sometimes Torn, but in general, like, this team, very hard to pilot because a lot of it does rely on Shadow Rider. But if you do find a Shadow Rider into good positions, you are able to sweep teams. And yeah, really impressive to be able to actually do really well with this team, especially because it doesn't have the most overwhelming offense other than Shadow Rider and sometimes there's Zamazenta. So you really have to find the positions for Shadow Rider to set up safely. And they were able to play extremely well at the event as well. Then we have Nikolai with the... It's kind of funny because he's used this kind of combination in Reg G as well. It was like Sneasler, Miraidon, Tornadus, Blood Moon, Ursaluna, Farigiraf. I don't remember what he had over Zamazenta, but it's a very strong combination that he's done really well with in Regulation G, if I'm not mistaken. And I just thought it was really interesting, and as well as like the fact that Steves are being showing up because of the electric seed that I can pair up with the Miraidon. The fact that it's able to threaten Terra Fairy Miraidons with that Gunk Shot. So if they try to avoid a Draco Meteor or Dazzling Gleam from the Miraidon, you could go for a Gunk Shot and cover for both, especially, which is pretty nice. Then also Blood Moon Ursaluna. We don't really see Blood Moon Ursaluna nearly as much as the regular Ursaluna, just because regular Ursaluna has better bulk, and also the facade is just really hard to switch into. Blood Moon Ursaluna, a little bit more difficult to utilize, mainly because its special defense is a lot weaker, so it's not exactly taking those Dazzling Gleams and definitely not taking that Draco Meteor well. But it's interesting to see, and I think Nikolai just had a lot of experience with Ursaluna Blood Moon, so was very comfortable with piloting it. And yeah, protect Farigiraf as well. No Helping Hand is a really interesting tech. And yeah, opting for Tornadus instead of like a Whimsicott to opt for Rain Dance to help out in the Koraidon matchup. So he just has a lot of experience with his team and is probably the best at knowing like how to position the Blood Moon with the Miraidon and the different kind of speed forms that he has on his team. Then we also have Alexander, who I think also had pretty much I don't know if this is the exact same sets, because I don't know if they're the exact same speed, if they built together. I think they probably did with Michael the Best and others, because they are both from Germany, so I imagine they all built the team together. So I do know that there were a few different team building partners. So first and fourth place, once again, having a team building group can help out immensely, especially with a early format like this one. And we have stuff like the Iron Bundle with the Miraidon once again. We have Kyogre Zacian with Roaring Moon for Tailwind support, alongside like Iron Hands, Urshifu, and Amoonguss. Kind of similar to, I think, the team that Gavin used at the UIC, but also like this is a team that's been very popular with Kyogre just in general. You have like Rapid Strike Urshifu that's able to take advantage of the rain. You have the Tailwindmon of Roaring Moon or Tornadus. You use Roaring Moon if you want that dragon coverage, as well as the fact that you want the, or not dragon coverage, but the dragon typing that can help out a decent amount, but also like fast knockoff, better than a Shadow Rider. Torn is just better generally if you are wanting that immediate tailwind or setting up a rain dance scenario for against opposing Koraidon, while having a guaranteed ground immunity that can help out a lot. Then we see like Lunala Miraidon once again. I think this is a bit of a different one, because this Lunala opting for the Terra Water. We see Terra Water only sometimes on like the Sun teams with Koraidon Lunala, but this one not opting for Terra Fairy, opting for Psychic to be able to hit like a Amoonguss and a few other Pokemon, which is interesting. Then with the Single Strike Urshifu, which I think is a pretty nice Pokemon that was going into just in general, because of the fact that through Electric Seed, you are able to hit the Lunala for a ton of damage, ignore that Electric Seed boost, and force a Terra. And if they don't Terra, they pretty much just take a lot or go down. You're also able to hit the Dark Urshifus, you're able to hit Incineroars, you ignore the Thunder Wave from the Prankster Grimmsnarl. So it is a mod that I think has more potential in the format as it will go on. It does struggle because there are fairy types, of course, and Terra Fairies that are popping up. But if you do have a way to be able to punish the fairy terrestrialization, I think it's a great one. You have Choice Specs Miraidon and then the Life Orb Entei, which was an interesting choice here. And we saw a few Enteis do well at Milwaukee. They didn't exactly break through the top cut barrier, but there were several in day 2, I believe. So not too surprising, because Entei with Inner Focus, pretty bulky in general, a good actual fairy resist mon. It's one of the few fire types that are actually able to resist Dazzling Gleam. That's nice. And then the Extreme Speed cleanup is always just really strong, because you're able to chip away opposing Miraidons, and then Extreme Speed will clean up. Like for instance, Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam. If you both Terra, get the Dazzling Gleam, then the Extreme Speed will clean up. It's a pretty nice mon. Then we have the Terapagos Calyrex Shadow Rider once again. Again, similar to what I mentioned before, in Milwaukee was able to top 8. Encore Disable, focus as Shadow Rider, just a better Scream Tail on this kind of build, and able to do quite a bit. What was interesting was this is the first appearance of Kyogre Miraidon to do really, really well at an event, getting ninth place and was 11-0 before losing in top 16 and opting for Thunder Miraidon. It's actually funny because before Utrecht, I was like, I was looking through pairs because I wasn't feeling like Zacian, Kyogre, and I thought about like, can Miraidon Kyogre work? And I'm like, Thunder would be interesting, but I was thinking of old Thunder of 120 base power because Thunder used to be 120 base power until they nerfed it to 110, I think, in Generation 6. And then it's just 110 base power. I don't know because I didn't really look at the calcs because Thunder, of course, 30% inaccurate if you don't if you don't have rain up, and 50% accurate if sun is up. So you really want to make sure that if you're going to be clicking Thunder, you have that rain up. So I'm not sure if that's the risk reward, if it's great. There might be calcs that electric just barely misses, especially if there's no electric terrain. So it might be worth it in cases, but I have no clue if it is truly worth it over the guarantee accuracy of electric drift, which is a pretty strong, consistent move already with a base 100. However, that extra power on an offensive team like Kyogre, being able to whittle down stuff is solid. And then just running like a pretty common composition with the Iron Hands and the Urshifu, the Serena with the wide lens that with the Queenly Majesty able to stop the priority into Kyogre, and the Covert Cloak, Tornadus with Rain Dance, and Taunt actually running Hurricane over Bleak Wind, so you do have a way to punish down any wide guard mons because you can still hit through with a very powerful Hurricane, which is also stronger into like single target against grass types, which also Hurricane is stronger into opposing Urshifu and can threaten a knockout into an Urshifu, which Bleak Wind generally will miss the KO, especially on a bulkier Urshifu, especially if the Torn doesn't have much special attack investment. Then we have like some bulkier stuff. We saw this similar to the Audi team. I think it is Audi team actually that was able to do well in Milwaukee with the Parting Shot, Grimmsnarl, Porygon 2, which was just an interesting tech. And I thought this team was really unique here with the Terra Flying Porygon 2. It actually doesn't run Terra Blast. A lot of Porygon 2s in Gen 9 have run Terra Blast, so you have that Terra Blast, Flying. But this one actually just running Tri Attack, which you do have a powerful normal type move that also has a chance to get one of 3 statuses, and of course if you get the statuses it's incredible, but just a consistent normal type attack. Shadow Ball that's able to hit the Lunalas and any Terra Ghost types. You have standard Calyrex Ice Rider, you have leftovers Terapagos with bulky safety goggles Incineroar, standard Amoonguss, and then Cornerstone Ogerpon with knockoff, which is an interesting tech for sure. And this team really just is a unique take on balance because you have balanced tools like the leftovers Terapagos, you have the Calyrex Ice Rider with Incineroar Amoonguss pairing with Porygon 2, but we just don't see Porygon 2 much in the format just because of the fact that knockoff is just a super common move, especially on opposing Incineroar. So if you do lose that Violet, Porygon 2 becomes just a lot less bulky in general. So it's just interesting to see that Porygon 2 was able to do pretty well at this tournament, getting a top 16. So compliments to the pilot in Giuseppe. We also have the Kyogre Zamazenta with pretty much the same idea as like the Zacian team. Just, Tailwind Kyogre, do a ton of damage with your physical attackers. Not much to say there. Another Shadow Rider Terapagos team for the setup. And then if we keep scrolling down, like these are just teams you would expect to do well at this event pretty much. We see another Sinistra with the Ho-Oh Miraidon, which I think I skipped over at Milwaukee. That was also able to top cut the event as well. That was piloted by, it was Dalway? Yeah, it was Dalway. So it was just an interesting tech to see because not only do you have the Regenerator, you have the Hospitality that's also able to heal on top of that alongside screens. It's just a really nasty combination if you don't have the best wall breakers, because that will just heal consistently over time, especially when Miraidon doing a ton of damage with Volt Switch. So something to take a note. And then yeah, like otherwise if you look down, you pretty much see, I think the only thing you might notice at this event is there were more Shadow Rider Zamazenta teams at this event, at least placing high. Then you have some interesting teams to say the least. I mean, Jamie Boyd is, I guess, the one we'll go over. And there are some teams that I think only Jamie can truly understand. And yeah, this is definitely one of them. Opting for an interesting combination with Shadow Rider plus Miraidon. Opting for Fake Tears Grimmsnarl, which makes sense. You have really fast and strong special attackers, so you're opting to try and get rid of mons quickly by clearing them with the Fake Tears and getting a combo KO. But some of these movesets, man, you have, for instance, Terra Blast, Terra Ground, Shadow Rider. I'm assuming that's to avoid Thunder Wave from opposing Grimmsnarl, but also the fact that you can threaten opposing Miraidon with that Terra Ground, Terra Blast with the Fake Tears combination. I guess you could threaten Incineroar, but man, I think it was on stream. I did watch this on or I did react to it on my stream, and man, it just felt like terrible. I mean, Terra Blast just seemed really rough here because if you aren't using the Terra Blast Terra Ground, it was just rough because there was, for instance, against Aurelian, who he played on stream, and like he just couldn't break through the Ursaluna through screens because the Ursaluna just checked both his restrictions, and he had like one Mon answer in Chesnaught to be able to threaten the Ursaluna, and he was usually forced to Terra because of the Ho. So it's a really rough one there, especially when he was running Terra Electric Miraidon, which is really powerful, but just only rely on electric type moves. I guess that is pairing with the Discharge with the Terra Ground because you could go for Discharge plus Astral Barrage, and assuming your opponent has no Wide Guard and has a slower field, you could just instant sweep, I suppose. You have the Quiver Dance, Strugglebug, Volcarona, the Solvest, Blood Moon, Ursaluna. Kind of surprised there's no Vacuum Wave because I feel like that's one of the best parts about using the Blood Moon Ursaluna with a Solvest was Vacuum Wave for the priority, especially to break through like Focus Ashes on Shadow Rider, but opting for Moonblast Snarl instead. And then Chesnaught, which is interesting, it has a really high defense. It actually had a pretty good performance in one of the UICs. I think it was also 2024, where Body Press with the Electric Seed. I mean, +1 body press off Chesnaught's really high physical defense. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it's actually pretty impressive. Does actually do a good amount of damage. Leech Seed, of course, that we've seen the Calyrex Ice Riders, like Leech Seed, Chesnaught is able to do pretty well in general. And then Wide Guard support, which is able to help out against this really powerful spread move. Spiky Shield is a better version of Protect, being able to chip at your opponent that goes for contact moves. Bulletproof is a great ability. Terrifier to be able to avoid the really effective fire type moves that can affect the Chesnaught, like Flutter Mane Chew combinations, the Sun modes, and more. So it's definitely a unique team for sure. He was able to do really well. I think he started 7-1, but unfortunately finished 8-3 and was one set away from making it into the top cut. Definitely one of the most unique teams from this event for sure. And then the rest, we keep scrolling, and then it's pretty much what you would expect. A lot of the duos that you would commonly see throughout. We see a Jumpluff able to finish in 36th place with the Groudon, which I think Groudon definitely has a bit more potential, especially after Milwaukee. My first thought was the Solvest Groudon to do well. We'll go over that a bit later, I suppose, as I'll be recapping some of the Pokemon and like some of the things I could see doing well in the future tournaments. But yeah, then we have Dill. I think was the only Future Paradox Pokemon, if I'm not mistaken, in this day 2 of the event. So that's really interesting here to see. And then more Weezings. We saw Tyranitar actually do well at 47th place. And yeah, Tyranitar, it's an interesting amount to say. Like Focus Sash Tyranitar did get top 16 at the Regulation G World Championship in 2024. So it actually does have some benefit. The fact that you have to Focus Sash to break through opposing Focus Sashes, the Shadow Shields on Lunala is broken if they don't have like leftovers or grassy terrain, so it does have some utilization. And then like Fast Taunt, Knockoff, and Rock Slide are great, especially on Shadow Rider plus Zamazenta. Like this core, of course, doesn't exactly like facing Ho-Oh, so the fact that you actually have rock cover should be able to threaten the Ho-Oh and be very nice, because if they Terra it as something that isn't like Fairy or Ghost, or specifically Fairy, I guess, like Zamazenta Body Press will threaten a heavy amount of damage into it. So interesting to see Tyranitar, but does make sense, especially as a weather counter as well, because again, doesn't have the best answers to Kyogre and Groudon teams, because photosynthesis stuff will definitely eat away at the team. But being able to break through like Flare Main Focus Ash and Ash Barrage and outspeed it because they don't have the Sun photosynthesis speed booster can be really cool. I understand the Tyranitar on that build. And we keep scrolling, and I don't think there was too much to say other than, oh yeah, there was the Landorus-T with the choice scarf, which is just, we don't really see Landorus-T. We only see Landorus-I, and I think Landorus-I, of course, just being able to threaten more damage with that Life Orb Sheer Force combination, ignoring the Intimidates, of course, in general, is probably the best combination. But the fact that you have Landorus-T with Ho-Oh, it's pretty cool. Not running Earthquake like we did back in the day of like VGC 2016, but opting for, you know, Speed Control. It's really cool because you can go for Rock Tomb with that Choice Scarf Landorus, ignore a Thunder Wave from an opposing Grimmsnarl, and get like a very consistent attack with the Miraidon. So, but that was pretty neat what this team can utilize, because having that Rock Tomb tech as well as like good flying cover should be able to hit Rillaboom, which is a Pokemon that the Miraidon doesn't enjoy facing, while having Stomping Tantrum coverage is pretty solid. And you could U-turn and of course Intimidate with screens. It's just such a good combination in general. So really cool to see the Landorus-T. I think it's the only one that was able to be utilized here. Oh, I guess not. I guess it was the only Iron Valiant, because Iron Treads is a Pokemon that was able to make day 2 here. Or maybe it's through the 8-3 bracket. I remember seeing a tweet about it where it was like the only Iron Valiant or the only Feature Paradox in the 8-3 bracket or something. Or something similar. Or I thought it was day 2, but I think it was the 8-3 bracket. And then just like a lot of teams that you see, like, or duos that we would see, more Calyrex Ice Rider, plus the Miraidon, more Lunala Koraidon, more Lunala Miraidons, more Calyrex Shadow Zamzentas. Yeah, pretty much like a lot of just stuff you would pretty much expect to see. So that was the Utrecht Regional or Utrecht Special event. And that was the first one. Well, let's move on to the next one, which is the Santiago Regional Championship. This was the event in Latam in Chile. So we have Max also winning the weekend with Calyrex Ice Rider Miraidon. And guess what? It was also Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider on this team, and had Miraidon as well with the choice specs with the Screens Grimmsnarl, but a few different partner changes. You had the Volcarona as a more supportive option here to give you speed control with Tailwind. You also had Redirection, so you could help set up the Calyrex Ice Rider more efficiently. You had the Assault Vest Iron Hands with the Fake Out support. Like, screens plus Assault Vest Iron Hands is just, that mod is not going down. And then you also had Ursaluna. This one not running Earthquake because there's no Lunala with Wide Guard, so it's a bit weaker here. So actually opting for Crunch to be able to hit opposing Lunala, because if you force the Terra from the Lunala, you are able to hit them with a Facade, and that will threaten a good amount of damage. So an interesting tech to have Crunch here. But yeah, similar idea. You have the Screens Grimmsnarl, you have a Wall Breaker Miraidon, you have pretty offensive mons that take more advantage of a Trick Room state, and then you have your Trick Room Calyrex Ice Rider, which is very bulky, can get the Leech Seeds that can punish Wide Guard mons, while just being able to sit there and, you know, heal back, which is a very big thing, especially if they play passive. So really strong team that was able to do well and win the event. And we saw like the team that was able to get first place in Milwaukee do well here as well, able to get second place. We have Juan Salerno running this team of Calyrex Shadow Zamazenta, and this team, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of players from Spain have been using this team, and I think a lot of players in Japan have also used this kind of 6 build. They do vary quite a bit. Like the Double Grass plus Zamazenta Shadow Rider and Raging Bolt have all in common in the respective regions. And then I think it's like Ting Lu or Xianpao. Like I think Japan likes using Ting Lu or Xianpao a lot. So like they changed Xianpao to Ting Lu. Like they use both sometimes. I've seen it at least. So it will do efficient there. And then the sets always just vary because it really just depends. But running the Double Grass, the reason you run the Double Grass on the Rillaboom plus Amoonguss is just better answers into Miraidon, because you can go for the Spore with this Amoonguss and you could go into Rillaboom. So if they try to reset the terrain, you usually get a free Spore up, which is really solid here, and just something that the Miraidon teams don't exactly enjoy. You have Raging Bull, which is just a really strong combination with Zamazenta Xianpao. The Xianpao enables the Zamazenta for its body press damage, threatens the Miraidon usually with the fast Icicle Crash with the Life Orb that can threaten a lot, especially with the Astral Barrage, Calyrex Shadow Rider. And this one opting for the Encore to be able to punish any passive plays. But I've seen like Nasty Plot, I've seen Encore Disable, I've seen quite a few different sets on the Shadow Rider, and I've seen the items change a lot. But it tends to be Life Orb Xianpao and Focus Sash Shadow Rider, but sometimes I've seen like, oh, Life Orb Shadow Rider and Focus Sash Xianpao, so they can definitely vary. Terra's also vary here, and I've seen the Raging Bolt change several times as well. And I think a very popular one, which was the team that Wolfbroad ended up bringing to this event. And I just realized there was also one event I forgot to cover that also happened during the Milwaukee Regional Championship. Hold on, I'm going to grab that real quick. All right, I completely forgot about this tour until I was already like too deep into the episode to really, make it more natural. However, this was a tournament that did happen in Japan, and there are like a few grassroots here and there, but this one was one of the bigger ones. It was an in-person event that also happened during the same week of Milwaukee. It's an unofficial one, but it was a pretty big grassroots tournament because I think there are like several games. I think Smash was also a part of this event, or Super Smash Bros. And yeah, this was a lot of, I think, players from Japan did show up and attend this event, and it was like best of one. I don't remember, it was close team sheet. I think it was close team sheet, but it might have been open team sheet, but I'm pretty sure it was close for the most part. And it had some really interesting matches, so if you do want to watch this, I'll link it down below with all the show notes of like the resources that I covered in today's video. But it was just a really interesting tournament to see. I think like this was the finals, and the winner ended up being UB Slow, and he ended up using the Wolf team that he brought to the Milwaukee Regional Championship, because I think like because of time zones, I think this was a one-day event, and Wolf's team was showcased day one, and then UB Slow ended up using the same six to win this event. So was pretty cool. Koraidon, Amoonguss, Incineroar, Fluttermane, Raging Bolt, Lunala. That was the team that ended up winning. And this is UB Slow, and he ended up winning this event. And then the team that won one of the VRs created by Zine was Shadow Rider, Urshifu, Zamazenta, Tornaz, Rillaboom, Xianpao. This was the team that got second place. I don't think there was a full team standing list, unfortunately, so there's not really too much. I think there was like a Kyogre, if I'm not mistaken, at one point in top four. Yes. Kyogre, Miraidon able to get top four with Xianpao, Urshifu, and Incineroar, Whimsicott, and I don't think I know the other top four team. Oh, no, I don't think it was. No, I don't think they showed both top four matches. No, I don't think they did. So just a cool thing to note, there wasn't really too much I had for this. That's why I forgot to include in the show notes, because I had it once, but I forgot to write it down. But yeah, I did want to mention this tournament because it was an interesting tournament to watch. I'd recommend watching it. I'll link it down below. But yeah, congrats to UB Slow, who has won this event. A really strong player from Japan, and was a former Japan national champion. So yeah, completely forgot about that tournament. I've had it down and I remember watching it, but I just forgot to include it. So there was that, so I will link that down below. And yeah, it reminded me, even though like it's not the exact teams, it's like very similar builds, but yeah, they were able to do pretty well. Koraidon, Lunala getting 4th and 5th place as well. Then we see Yan Sim also using the team that Shohei Kimura, also known as Zine, was able to get 6th place with it, where we also had like Terapagos plus the Shadow Rider. Again, this team that was very popular in Regulation G, with the Terapagos having the Kayak Shadow Rider instead. And then a interesting take of Lunala and Zamazenta paired with Raichu, which was Terra Fairy and Assault Vest, which is actually kind of funny because I was having dinner in Portugal with a few of the Italian VGC players, and I was talking about Raichu and like how I felt Raichu actually could put in quite a bit of work on specific builds, especially for Kyogre to help out against the Miraidon. And guess what? Raichu was able to top cut this event, so it was really cool to see having the access to the Terra Fairy to take on the Draco Meteor. The Assault Vest allows you to take the Dazzling Gleams okayishly. Has ways to pivot. Nuzzle for speed control can really help support the team. So yeah, just an interesting tech. And then Darkest Lariat and Incineroar, which I think is cool because of the fact that Electricity Miraidon is just super popular right now. So the fact that Darkest Lariat is an Incineroar signature move, or it used to, well, it was weird because it used to be Incineroar signature move in Gen 7. Then in Gen 8, they gave it to like Grimmsnarl, and I don't remember if they made it TM, but then I think Grimmsnarl and I think a few other Pokemon got it, but maybe it's just Grimmsnarl for some reason. And then now Grimmsnarl doesn't get it, and I'm pretty sure Incineroar is the only one that gets Darkest Lair again. So I don't know what happened to that, but yeah. So Darkest Lair is a cool move because it does ignore any defense or changes to the defense stat on the opposing team. I've used Darkest Lariat before, actually. I used it in 22 Worlds, if I'm not mistaken, to do well at the World Championship, and I think Darkest Lariat's a cool move. Like, Knockoff is definitely taking the cake because of like all getting rid of all these items, but I do see potential for Darkest Lariat to come back if Electricity Lunala just becomes too persistent, because just a way to just threaten Lunala for really, really heavy damage, which Darkest Lariat I think is a really cool way to, and be very rewarding on some team builds. So that was the Santiago Regional Championship, or Santiago. I am starting to lose my voice, so I'm starting to slack on the pronunciations, but yes, these are the teams we're in day 2 as well, which, you know, aren't like too surprising for like what you would expect to see at this kind of event in general. Just like a lot of compositions that you would expect to see. Maybe like this, like Okidogi, like there's a few interesting picks, more Sinistra, like a Sinistra Dialga was able to make day 2 of the event. But yes, these are the teams that shouldn't be too much of a surprise here. Now we have the Melbourne Regional Championship. So many regionals happening worldwide, but yes, this is the Melbourne Regional Championship that also happened in the same weekend, and the winner was Masayoshi Kuro, who was able to win the event with Galarian Weezing, and I cannot remember if Galarian Weezing has ever won an event, so this, I don't know if it's Galarian Weezing's first win, but taking some inspiration from James Evans with the Shadow Rider ability shield Koraidon with the Galar Weezing, and pairing it up with the Chiyu, which of course is able to direct a lot of damage, and then a few small changes with the Incineroar over the Brew Bonnets with the safety goggles, which is interesting, also having Protect, and then the Walking Wake, which is able to do quite a bit thanks to its Assault Vest, able to threaten a lot of damage in the sun with the Hydro Steam, the Draco Meteors, the Snarl support, as well as Aqua Jet just for the priority. If you do need that priority, like, why not run Aqua Jet if you don't need that fire move? Because you do have Koraidon and the Chiyu for your fire coverage. And yeah, just some really interesting versions where I think the tournament was streamed. So if you do want to watch it, I will link it down below. I haven't watched it yet, but I will probably be watching it after this goes up. So yeah, otherwise, Covert Cloak on the Weezing, I really like this because you don't really need goggles on the Weezing, which I think James was running at the time. Running the goggles on Instant in case you do need a Spore switch in. And yeah, just interesting to see double Dark Fire on the same team, but I do think that they play their own defense or different roles, where Chi's more offensive and Incineroar be more of a Pivotmon. And if you don't care about the type synergy because you have other mons to take advantage of, yeah, like it can definitely work. And then we see stuff like Jude able to get second place featuring the Calyx Shadow Rider with Terapagos. This one opting for Willis Pollen Puff, able to burn stuff that could threaten the Terapagos on the physical side, and then Pollen Puff to be able to heal the Terapagos back to Terra Shell can be absurd with 50% healing the Terapagos even after it terrestrializes. So can be super threatening. Knockoff on Cornerstone Ogerpon, I guess it's just been a trend, especially since you don't need the grass move in a lot of cases because of the fact that you do have the Rillaboom on this team. So running the double grass, Knockoff can be able to hit the like Lunalas that carry leftovers, because there's still some Calm Mind Lunalas out there, so being able to punish those can be very helpful. The support Flutter Mane, which we saw on the Terapagos teams back in Regulation G, and then yeah, just standard Terapagos builds. And then we see Shadow Rider plus Zamazenta once again, able to get third place. Fourth place, we see an interesting take on the Miraidon plus the Cali Ice, running the Assault Vest Miraidon with the Choice Scarf Annihilate with the coaching, and also opting for Brick Break as the fighting move, just to be able to break opposing screens if necessary, as the Focus Sash Entity with Synchronize, which it's always funny to see like Synchronized Entity because there's no psychic terrain, but you do have to fake out on the entities that you can go for. Like you still have like Trick Room and Follow Me, which is a great pairing. It's like what entity wants to do, and of course when you're running Miraidon, some teams will opt for double terrain. It's not bad, but if you need a support Pokemon that you don't want interfering with your Miraidon, just run the synchronized entity and it will work out. Because this also is like Electric Seed Iron Hands, which it's so funny because like you have a Sulfast Miraidon, so you can't run on the Iron Hands. Why not go Electric Seed instead? I thought it was just a really, really unique take on it for sure. And then we had like, you know, like Calyrex Ice Rider Miraidon on a balanced team. Then we see more Shadow Riders, Zamazenta, Terapagos plus Zamazenta once again, and Lunala Koraidon. Like a lot of these builds shouldn't really surprise you. That was the top 8. We did see though that Giratina was able to top cut its first regional championship. And the reason that Giratina is probably able to do well is just because of the fact that Ursaluna is just such a common Pokemon right now, with its guts, facade, just threatening so much damage alongside with his ground coverage. The fact that there are a few Pokemon that can take the combo extremely well, and Giratina is one of them. Giratina is immune to Ursaluna, so if you keep that typing, you are able to threaten, or you're just able to wall the Ursaluna and then threaten the partners, or you can threaten the Ursaluna because this one's running Draco Meteor instead of like a Dragon Claw, running a mix set, so you could do more damage, get the KOs in a Koraidon, Miraidon, because Dragon Claw might miss those KOs. With Draco Meteor, you hit the regular Ursaluna on the weaker special side, so can definitely be a thing there. I think the only thing that's unfortunate about Giratina is because a lot of them are running consumable items in either Power Herb or the was this Power Herb and Electric Seed. There we go. Poltergeist is a bit weaker of a move now because of the fact that you need the opponent or the target to hold an item, so it's a bit weaker compared to targeting those Pokemon down specifically, but still a pretty decent mod in general. This one running Zamazenta for fighting ghost coverage, which is great, of course. GM Power can power up their attacks. Entei being a good fire type move, resistance to fairy, which is always appreciated, can threaten a lot. The Stone Edge for the whole matchup, and Incineroar as well, which these mons don't well, Zamazenta doesn't care about Incineroar, but there is that as well. It's also able to punish Terra Bug Incineroar because it doesn't matter if they Terra or not, you are getting hit by the Stone Edge, and that is going to be a factor. And yeah, otherwise just like balance combos in general. So things to keep a note then. Otherwise, maybe some interesting Pokemon here like Pelipper from Nick Khan getting 15th place, and you know, a few Clefairies, more Galarian Weezings, and Okidogi, Glimmora, which I thought was interesting because this is another Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider, and with leftovers, the idea of getting the poison with the Glimmora, using Mortal Spin and potentially getting that toxic debris up alongside Okidogi with both Drain Punch and Close Combat, just being able to threaten quite a bit of damage while healing. Choice Scarf Miraidon able to pivot around alongside the standard support core of Incineroar and Rillaboom. So interesting take on the poison tax. More Porygon to Daniel Walker's team. This is a team. This is one of the wildest ones I think that I've seen. It features the Galarian Weezing Toedscruel combo. You might recognize this combo especially from Regulation H. Running the Focus Sash Weezing with the Covert Cloak on the Toedscruel, you have Acid Spray to weaken the opponent's special defense for Shadow Rider and Miraidon and the Galarian Weezing. Rage Powder for redirection. Grassknot for a heavy grass type attack that can actually do decent amount of damage. But yeah, this is a crazy one. Neutralizing Gas, getting rid of the ability on Toedscruel that makes it Spore. Negative priority, you have Incineroar with the Helping Hand support, as well as U-Turn, Fake Out, and Knock Off to get rid of items. You have Choice Scarf Shadow Rider is just... it's insane because Shadow Rider is already the fastest Pokemon in the format. And then he's like, oh, let's make it faster. Let's make it faster. Go for Astral Barrage. It has Snarl as well. It has Shadow Ball to get around Wide Guard and then Trick. Like, the Shadow Rider is just all focused down on the Ghost type attacks. Then you also have the Electric Seed Miraidon that goes for Calm Mind, which... Okay, and then you have Terra Ground, Terra Blast, Porygon 2 with Trick Room, Icy Wind, Terra Blast, Recover. Like, this team is wild. It is wild. And I can't even say like where the combination themes go, because I guess you could do like Toedscruel Wheezing with Calyrex Shadow Item Miraidon. You could do like Incineroar Shadow Item Miraidon Wheezing, or Porygon 2. You could do Porygon 2 Incineroar, which I'm not sure where you follow up from there. I guess it's like Miraidon and then like one of the others. But like, yeah, there's definitely some really interesting, unique combos that's like hard to get at a glance, I would say, because when I first saw this team, I was like, wow, what a team. What a team. Definitely one of the more unexpected teams of the event that did pretty well, like going 7-3 and missing the top cut by literally a one game, which is very impressive. Very impressive. But pretty much everything else you would expect to see at the event, I would believe. Like all these restricted duos, pretty much we see. Then we have the final tournament of the weekend. Oh my goodness, 4 tournaments this weekend is so much. So much. We have Bangkok, Thailand with the Master Ball League. And if you don't know, this is a tournament that allows them to qualify for the World Championship. So, and yes, this was a very, very interesting tournament because, oh man, when you look at this team results, so Galarian Weezing ends up winning again. So there were 2 Galarian Weezing wins in the weekend. This is with Dondozo this time, which really hasn't seen too much. We've seen like 1 or 2 Dondozos and they're able to do decent. But the fact that Dondozo Tatsugiri was able to do well, it's kind of similar to some teams that we saw before. I think there was, especially like the team Justin Knox used to get top 16 at the World Championship, is probably the one I would go to with the Regulation G. There was the Calyrex Shadow Rider with Life Orb, with Terra Normal and Pollen Puff to be able to hit like Farigiraf, for instance, or Indeedee female. With the Galarian Weezing that's able to set up the Toxic Spikes and the Poison Gas with Neutralizing Gas, just shutting off any abilities. The Dondozo Tatsugiri combination, this one being a very bulky order up with the Droopy Tatsugiri that gives it a defense boost from order up, which can just allow for poison stalling, especially with that body press building up, really physically defensive Dondozo. This one opting for a substitute, I guess, to just be able to be a nice staller, and especially like substitute can be nice against like Miraidon Draco Meteors that could be coming your way. You get that substitute up, it can be a really good factor. And there was also, I think, other teams that were running Ability Shield Koraidon with the Dondozo also during the time of the Galarian Weezing. And yeah, the Ability Shield with the Galarian Weezing. So you have 2 restrictions that can take advantage of the Weezing. You have the Covert Cloak Brute Bonnet as support with pretty much the set we've commonly seen. And it can pair well with the Dondozo combination, but it could also pair with like a good for Shadow Rider Weezing, Koraidon Brute Bonnet. Or you have the Dozo mode where you could lead the Weezing plus like one of your restricteds and then pair up the Dondozo Tatsugiri and finish and clean up with the Dondozo Tatsugiri, or just like wear down your opponent and clean up with your restricted that you probably say towards the end game. So very interesting to see that actually win the event. And then the second place team, oh man, we have featured this team on the channel. I have used it and it is something. We have another Calyrex Ice Rider Miraidon, Choice Specs Miraidon with a clear Amulet Calyrex Ice Rider, the more standard one. And it has, you know, it's pretty much what you would expect, right? Farigiraf, Iron Hands, Iron Treads, and then just has a Scraggy here. Scraggy was able to almost win this tournament. It was able to get second place. And what does Scraggy do? If you haven't watched the video, I highly recommend you check it out, where I used this team for almost like 2 hours. It was absurd. But Scraggy is an interesting mod. Now, you could go 2 ways, Scraggy or Scrafty. The Scraggy here having the Eviolite to, of course, it is a non-fully evolved Pokemon. It doesn't have the best defenses because it's like base 70, I think, for each of its defenses, with its HP stat being pretty low. I think it's base 50, if I'm not mistaken. So, doesn't have the highest HP, has some okay defenses. A Violet will make it, okay, it's decent, but still not like, oh, absurdly bulky. But it has some techs here. The fact that Scraggy has a low base speed of base 48 allows it to be really good into Pokemon like Iron Hands and the Ursalunas and opposing Calyrex Ice Riders. Because all of those Pokemon are roaming around this format, really popular right now. and they're all base 50. So that's a very interesting note. So there's a lot of speed ties around the base 50 speed tier. Scraggy, being slower, can allow for a few interesting combinations. One is the coaching. So you can get a fast coaching off into your Calyrex Ice Rider or your Iron Hands and be able to tank the attacks better, because it's both min speed Calyrex Ice Rider and min speed Iron Hands on the team. So you go for the coaching, +1 attack defense Calyrex Ice Rider, +1 Iron Hands, just allows them to take on opposing ones much better. Second thing that the Scraggy has, well, I guess 2 and 3 are Fake Out and Intimidate. Great support. It allows Trick Room to be set up. It allows for strong damage output. It allows Miraidon to be able to take the attacks better, because this one's a really bulky Miraidon. And you have that Fake Out, you have the Intimidate support. Always just a good combination. Fourth thing it has, Endeavor. Endeavor is the main reason you're going to use Scraggy over Scrafty, because technically I think you could get away with more bulk on a Scrafty that runs like a power item like Power Herb or Macho Brace or something like that, that would have to speed, so you can get more consistent coaching loss. But what Scraggy does, it has a lower base HP, and what that allows you to do with the Endeavor, similar to Whimsicott, you're able to go for Endeavor that's outspeeds your Calyrex Ice Rider and Iron Hands under Trick Room. And if the opponent did target Scraggy and Scraggy's around, you could go for Endeavor, weaken your opponent's foe, and then follow up with a strong hit to clean up a weakened foe. And that's where the Endeavor Scraggy really gets to shine over something like the power item Scrafty. So yeah, and then it also has as a bonus Foul Play, which same type attack bonus from the dark typing. You are able to do a lot to opposing Calyrex Ice Rider and to physical attackers in general. Can be really strong. And that is how Scraggy got second place at this event. Absurd. Then we have stuff like the Terapagos plus Calyrex Shadow Rider with the Scream Tail this time, because the Shadow Rider I think was Willis Pollenpuff on this team. Yeah, it was Willis Pollenpuff. Similar idea with Terapagos, just able to support the Terapagos that way. And then you have Encore Disable Scream Tail, which Terapagos is really appreciated with the standard core of Rillaboom, Urshifu, and Incineroar, of course. So really strong supports for the Terapagos, especially we see the Koraidon plus Lunala Sun team be able to do well and get 4th place. The Zamazenta plus Calyrex Shadow Rider with the double grass paired with double dark type does well to get 5th place. And yeah, Pelipper with Miraidon and the Calyrex Ice Rider was able to get 6th place. Calyrex Ice Rider, Miraidon. I think this is the team that was able to get 2nd place at the Milwaukee Regional Championship, but it just has Choice X Miraidon instead of Choice Scarf this time, because it does have very similar stuff. I think just a few small changes, like the Volcarona, I believe, had Willis originally and doesn't have it now. I think it's replaced for Struggle Bug, but it's pretty similar concept here. And yeah, then just Lunala Miraidon, the team that ended up winning Milwaukee Regional Championship, finishing in 8th place. And then a lot of this is stuff we see Lunala or Shadow Rider Terapagos once again, Lunala Miraidon in 10th, Lunala plus Koraidon in 11th, Lunala Miraidon for 12th and 13th, a hard Tricker team with Calyrex Ice Rider, Lunala Torkoal in 14th, and yeah, pretty much teams you would have just expected to see. So that was the Master Ball League, and that was the final event of the weekend. So we have covered every single event so far that has happened to date in Regulation I, at least majors. There were a few grassroots tournaments, but they weren't nearly as big, so I wanted to cover for the really big tournaments, and these are the mostly the important official ones and the one big Japan Grassroots tournament that was held in person. All right, so this video has already been pretty long. I'm just going to go over a few trends of like why they might be popular and why they picked up, and go over maybe one or two things that I think we could maybe see later on. But really, this meta has just progressed so much. Like, this could be completely different in Portland for all I know, and the following weeks ahead. However, let's explain on like why we're seeing what we're seeing. So the rise of Ursaluna, I think you might be wondering, Ursaluna is a big threat. Why is it so common now, especially? The reason Ursaluna, I think, is massive now in this format is because of two, or like maybe a few reasons. One is the rise of restricted Miraidon and, well, Miraidon, Lunala, and the Calyrex Shadow Rider, because now a lot more teams are running those restricted Pokemon. And one of the best answers to all three of them that is just immune to their attacks or their strongest attacks is Ursaluna. So Ursaluna is really good into Miraidon, assuming that they don't just drop a Draco Meteor immediately and knock you out. But if you have Trick Room up, Ursaluna can threaten a lot with Facade and Headlong Rush to one-shot the Miraidon on the opposing side, and that is pretty solid. Otherwise, like Lunala and Shadow Rider don't usually threaten to knock out into Ursaluna without some crazy Terra Blast tech. And the Ursaluna, I think it's much better right now, mainly because of Lunala. And Lunala we see mostly with Ursaluna as probably one of the core compositions because of the fact that support of Lunala wasn't that common in Regulation G, and Lunala ended up picking up towards the end of Regulation G, but most of the Lunala sets tended to be a more offensive set, utilizing Power or Meteor Beam with Expanding Force, 3 attacks usually, maybe Protect or Trick Room. They didn't usually carry Wide Guard as much. They would rely on a partner to set up Wide Guard usually, or just go for Terrestrialization to avoid like Astral Barrage from opposing Shadow Rider. And also ran the Calm Mindset, which means you weren't running Wide Guard on those sets usually. So the reason why Ursaluna with Lunala has been pairing up really well is mainly because now you can run a more supportive restricted, and a lot of the Lunalas tend to run Trick Room and Wide Guard. And that ends up helping out Ursaluna immensely because of the fact that with the Trick Room, of course, being able to set up, it's really consistent. You want to be able to do more damage with other Pokemon if you're using a restricted more in a defensive setup position where you're using the Lunala. It's more invested into setting up that Trick Room. You need a way to still have a wall breaker. So Ursaluna under that Trick Room makes a lot of sense. And Ursaluna, with just how good it is into those 3 restrictions that I mentioned before, but also Lunala supporting Ursaluna in another way with Wide Guard. And Wide Guard is really clutch here because of the fact that Wide Guard with the Lunala paired with Ursaluna is really good because of the fact that Calyrex Ice Rider with Glacial Lance, Kyogre Water Spout, there were a few other spread moves out there, but those are the main ones. Just made it hard for Ursaluna to really switch in because it was vulnerable to a lot of those spread moves. Even Heat Wave from like Chi would do a ton of damage in the sun. So Ursaluna would still be taking a lot of special defense because it has decent bulk, but it's not like incredible, and you would still be taking a lot in response. And then you have to also worry about like the flame or the burn damage you'd be taking after getting burned from the flame orb. So it makes sense that Ursaluna is able to pick up because it's just a really good partner with Ursaluna, because like a supportive Lunala is just a really incredible partner to Ursaluna just because it has so much synergy. You have the Ghost in the normal type, so if Lunala is threatened by a Ghost type move, you could switch into Ursaluna. And of course, get that Guts activated with the Flame Orb on the switch in, and then threaten quite a bit of heavy damage. If the Ursaluna is threatened by a fighting move, you can switch out into the Ursaluna, or you could switch out the Ursaluna into a Lunala and be able to take the fighting move, just be immune to it. So they have really good synergy there as well. And then of course, Trick Room, Wide Guard, really good for setting up the Ursaluna and protecting it from really heavy damage. So it's also, again, threatens so much damage with Facade, and it's really a nice combo in general because you also threaten like Terra Ghost Mons that, you know, might try to absorb a Facade and be immune to it. Then you just hit them with a Moongeist Beam follow up, and then their take some effect on Moongeist Beam. So there's a lot of ways that the core just synergizes. So it just makes a lot of sense that we see Ursaluna especially paired with the Lunala. And another, I guess, small reason why is because of the fact that Rillaboom was a pretty common Pokemon, so you couldn't really get away with running Earthquake Ursaluna in the format in the most cases, unless you were running like Miraidon for Rigraff, or maybe you had your Indeedee set as well to change the terrain. But now because you can run like stuff like Lunala plus Miraidon and Ursaluna, the fact that you have electric terrain to shut down the grassy terrain so the Earthquake's doing more damage does help out Ursaluna in allowing it to go for a spread type move that's actually able to do a lot. And again, Wide Guard with your Lunala prevents the Lunala from getting hit from the Earthquake, which is very solid as well. So that's why Ursaluna has been picking up a lot in popularity, especially on those kinds of builds, especially the Trick Room builds that feature Lunala one of the best partners to it. Then we have Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider. And you might be thinking, where did this come from this weekend? But really, if you have followed a lot of the metagame in the East, this has actually been a common pick from the start of Regulation I, actually. They have been using Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider for quite a bit, especially like the ladder tours, like the grassroots ladder friendly tours, not the ones that were for qualifications, but the friendly ones. A lot of them ended up using Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider, and it's been a pretty big staple in the East for so long, and it started finally picking up, I think, at this event especially. So Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider, you might be wondering, why Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider and only rely on Glacial Lands as your attack move? It's because of the fact that Calyrex Ice Rider was very awkward in the beginning because of the fact that wide guards were everywhere, right? You had Zamazenta, you had Lunala. Those Pokemon were very popular at the beginning and threatening quite a bit with that wide guard. So it really stopped you there. And then high horsepower, it's an okay move, but it's not really doing too much damage to a boosted Zamazenta, +1 defense. It's not doing too much to Lunala. So the Calyrex Ice Rider wasn't able to really dish out much damage. And then we had a lot of cases where Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider could be able to punish a lot of those Pokemon, because if you're playing passive against the Calyrex Ice Rider by clicking wide guard, you could go for Leech Seed. Zamazenta and Lunala actually have pretty high HP for the most part, especially Lunala. So the fact that you'd be able to recover the damage, and if they spam wide guard, they're taking a Leech Seed damage every time, which means that your Calyrex Ice Rider is sticking around, and then once the Lunala is, or the Zamazenta is forced to switch out from taking too much Leech Seed, or that it is just sticking around, you're either getting a bunch of recovery, or you're getting and waiting for that moment, you're staying healthy to fire off those Glacial Lances when you get that opportunity. So that's where the leftovers Calyrex Ice Rider has really picked up with the Leech Seed, and yeah, it's really picked up especially during this next round of regional waves. So it is pretty strong because of the fact that you do have a lot more room with usually more ground types, usually as partners next to Calyrex Ice Rider, so you have ground coverage without relying too much on high horsepower, and you usually have other mods to be able to threaten. So all you need is Glacial Lands. It is one of the most broken moves, and when you look at Calyrex defenses, it is one of the bulkiest Pokemon out there. Base 100 HP with 150 defense and 130 special defense is insane. With Leech Seed and leftovers, the Calyrex Ice Rider is already taking hits, and then with Leech Seed leftovers recovery, it will stick around for quite a while, so it can definitely be a nuisance. So we've seen Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider pick up more in popularity, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it still stick around for the next couple of weeks throughout Regulation I. Then Landorus won a regional championship, and Michael really showcased how strong it could be throughout the stream, and I'm surprised it hasn't picked up more in usage, just because if there are things like Grimmsnarl and there are things like the Porygon that are just threatening, especially if they're not running the choice specs anymore. If some are running Assault Vest and Scarf, they're definitely threatening a lot less damage, so you can definitely utilize Landorus in a way to threaten really strong Earth powers and Sludge Bombs, which is really solid. So I think Landorus Incarnate definitely has a lot of potential in the format. It's able to hit the Miraidons, it's able to hit the Zamazentas. Like, even if they get light screen up, Earth Power is still doing a lot of damage. We saw the Landorus on stream one shot to Zamazenta with Earth Power. Like, that is absurd, because that is not like a sun boosted attack. It's not a choice specs attack. That is just the raw damage of Landorus Incarnate. So I think Landorus Incarnate has always had a really good amount of potential in the format, especially with Kyogre teams, because of course being able to pair up with the Sandseer Storm is really nice. But the fact that Life Orb Sheer Force just exists, the combination, the multipliers just allow Landorus to do a ton of damage. It's a pretty bulky Pokemon. We saw Michael use it with screens. It's able to tank attacks pretty well. If they're not choice specs Miraidon, they're like Assault Vest. If they try to Draco Meteor you probably live after a light screen, especially if you have some bulk, and then you can fire back a ton of damage with Earth Power. Absolutely worth it. So I think Landorus Incarnate definitely probably should have been used a bit more at the beginning, but I do think that it is a really nice Pokemon to have here. I think the only changes is like a lot of the Landorus Incarnates used to run Terra Water, towards the end of Regulation G. That was for the Ice Rider matchup, because you'd be able to punish like Ice Rider Urshifu. For instance, the Shielding Tang and Justin Tang team they used had Terra Water Landers, and I think the team that won Vancouver also had Terra Water Landers, so it was able to tank those attacks. But you can't really run Terra Water now because a lot of the Ice Rider teams do run Rhydon, so you can't really rely on that, because if you do Terra Water in front of the Cali Ice, you're getting revenge swept by the Miraidon. So I think Terra wise, the Landers will probably change. We saw Poison win the event. I think Poison's really good because it just powers up the Sludge Bomb, gives it a Dazzling Gleam resist as well. But I do think that Poison's one of the best defensive typings. Otherwise, I could definitely see Fairy still, in case you want to play that Draco Meteor mind game if they're locked into the Draco Meteor from a Choice Specs or Choice Scarf, or potentially Steel, because Steel will allow you to take the Dazzling Gleam, the Draco Meteors still decently, and fire back some pretty strong damage while resisting the Glacial Lance from Calyrex Ice Rider, especially if they're running the Leech Seed set and not the high horsepower set. So still has some pretty good defensive coverage against the Ice Rider as well. And let's go into take. As much as I don't like Groudon, after Milwaukee, I thought this one might have something it can contribute. And let me just say, I thought that, and then I used Groudon for I think a few videos, and it has missed a lot. But I do think that Groudon has a place somewhere here. And one team I forgot to bring up, because I just for some reason forgot about it, was a really interesting team that made top cut, if I'm not mistaken. I think this made top cut, and then I think it didn't. I think it was a top 16 or a top 32 team. I can't remember, from Joji Kaide. And this player has done really well and won several global challenges at this point, global/grand challenges, and has been one of the strongest online players, and he's been crushing it recently. So this team was the team he brought to Melbourne, and I thought it was a really interesting team. It featured the Asolvus Groudon, which I also think is probably the set you want to run in the format currently. Had Life Orb Raging Bolt with the Incineroar Moongus combination. This one running Toxic, which is interesting. It helps out against like Wide Guard Lunala, same kind of idea, able to punish like them going for Wide Guard consistently. Then there's Calyrex Ice Rider was insane. The fact that this Calyrex Ice Rider was Glacial Lance, Body Press, Trick Him, and Imprison. So you can imprison opposing Calyrex Ice Rider, but you could also stop Zamazentas from going for Body Press while having the Terra Normal. So you're just immune to like Shadow Rider Calyrex plus the Zamazenta combination if you get the Imprison up. Like that was definitely something here. And then you have Brick Break on the Groudon for his opposing screens. So I think like there's some things that the Groudon can run. I definitely think Asolvus is the best item choice here. And I think there's a few different ways that this Groudon could do really well, mainly because if you look at like the teams that have done well, it's like Groudon plus Lunala, or not Groudon plus Lunala. It's like Miraidon plus Lunala. Then it's the Calyrex Ice Rider plus Miraidon. Then we see like Shadow Rider plus the Koraidon, which is probably a bit different for the most part. But yeah, I do think Groudon has potential, especially with so many Lunala combinations. Because of its high physical defense stat, it's able to tank it hits decently well with that Assault Vest. Precipice Blades is just one of those moves, man, where it is not rewarding enough. It has really good offensive coverage. Like Ground's great offensive coverage, but like it doesn't have any boost like Hyora's Origin Pulse. Like you have Shadow Rider and Ice Rider that have 100% accurate versions of their attacks. This doesn't even get a weather boost or anything. Kind of not worth it at times, but like if you can land attacks, it is a pretty good one. And I think that what Groudon can do, you do have good ground coverage, which in a Miraidon format, where Miraidon's one of the most popular Pokemon in the format, it can put in work. And then you also have access to an extra ground move that can go through Wide Guard because you do run that Assault Vest. And then I think Groudon just gets some other moves that just make it work. We saw Brick Break work for the screens. That's definitely a way you could go for it. I think there are other moves you can also run. Now, there are a few Terras that you can keep in mind. I think Fire and Fairy and Steel are probably the ones I look for. Fire, of course, is pretty standard because of the fact that you could take advantage of the sun, have that Terra Fire, and then power up like a Heat Crash, which is able to do a ton of damage to Lunala, which is more of a lightweight Pokemon. So you do get a really powerful Heat Crash to do a ton of damage while resisting the Ice Rider's Glacial Lance and firing off some pretty powerful damage. I could also see the Heat Crash being dropped in general and going with something like a Terra Fairy or Terra Steel on the Groudon. Terra Fairy would be really nice to be immune to Draco Meteor from the Miraidon, while also giving a typing that isn't weak to like Ursaluna that could revenge KO with a Headlong Rush, and you'd be able to live one hit from Ursaluna. So that is one also a tech that I could definitely see, while being just neutral to stuff in general. And yeah, be able to wall like the Terra or the Heavy Slam Zamazentas. That's also another thing that Groudon I think could work here. And then also Terra Steel, because I think Terra Steel could come into play similar to the Ice Right. It's able to be resistant to Ice Rider Glacial Lance, resistant to Draco Meteor, resistant to Dazzling Gleam. I could definitely see it paired up with screens, and it could definitely put in work there. You also have access to Heavy Slam, which could be a great way to try and get rid of a Grimmsnarl immediately or punish a Terra Fairy Lunala, which is nice because I think Groudon would also be able to run Crunch, for instance, which is really solid against the Lunalas that can force Terras or the Shadow Riders. So that is a move that I can keep in mind. You also have the fire moves in Heat Crash and Fire Punch. You also could just run Iron Head if you don't want to run Heavy Slam, which makes sense. You could be able to hit like other Terra Fairies like Terra Fairy Raging Bull, which are decently heavy, so Heavy Slam's doing a bit less. But yeah, I think Groudon does have some potentials. You can also run Rock Move if your team's weak to Ho-Oh, but I probably would just rely on running other Pokemon to break through Ho-Oh, because I think this thing has an interesting matchup against some restricteds and just some of the popular cores we've seen. And I do think that Assault Groudon has potential. If you're willing to go for that Precipice Blades Gauntlet and hit all those Precipice Blades while playing a best of 3 tournament, yeah, this thing could maybe do something if it lands. So that's one mod I think could take, and Joji was able to showcase like, hey, it does work. So something that I had in mind. Another Pokemon I thought was like Rayquaza. I think Rayquaza is really good with the airlock ability. The fact that Rayquaza is pretty good against those weather teams that are just popular right now. Paranormal for the Lunala and the Shadow Rider. And you are able to threaten a lot, especially with a Swords Dance. Swords Dance in extreme speed would do a ton of damage and potentially get rid of a Grim before I can set up a screens or T-Wave you, which could always be really annoying. So it always have some benefits there. It has really good coverage in general. Again, it has base 150 attack and special attack, really good coverage in general. Its bulk isn't the best, but it's like decent enough. Base 105 HP, 90 in the defenses. I mean, it can put in work. It just needs the right compositions. I had a lot of fun using Rayquaza, and I still think it has potential. Of course, with Ice Rider being a thing now, more popular, could be a bit tricky. However, this thing, I believe, could make a splash in some cases, and we did see it do well in the Japan Ladder Tour for the qualifier. So I think Rayquaza probably has more partners out there where it could really do well against those kind of comps. And we should talk about Grimmsnarl. You might be wondering, why is Grimmsnarl so common? It wasn't even common in Regulation G. So the reason why Grimmsnarl is so popular right now, we also saw it a lot in 2022, where screens were just really good with Dynamax, Speed Control with Thunder Wave. The Trick Lagging Tail set was also a factor where it would be really good at shutting down the Max Pokemon, the Pokemon that went for their Dynamax. So yeah, the reason why Grimmsnarl is so good now, especially compared to like Regulation G2, is because when you think about it, Urshifu, well, Urshifu's been used in the format. It's definitely a lot less usage than it had, and it's a lot less threatening than it has been because of the fact that you can run 2 restricteds, and Grimmsnarl paired with Miraidon, of course, is a big way, because one of the way you play through screens, Surging Strikes just guarantee crits. The fact that you could run the Miraidon to counter the Water Urshifu while having the screens with Grimmsnarl, and just really the fact that Grimmsnarl is supposed to support against the other restricteds, against your restricteds, so your restricteds are able to sweep, is pretty much the reason why Grimmsnarl is so big here. And another thing that's also helped the Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider, because under screens, it's really hard to damage Calyrex Ice Rider, which is already hard to break through because it's insane defenses. But paired with screens, then the Leech Seed healing, it's like really hard to break through. So Grimmsnarl is able to be a great support mon in this case. It doesn't have to worry about water Urshifu nearly as much as it used to, although there are some cases it can, but you still have a Miraidon, which is fine. But also the thing is, it's really annoying to actually get rid of Grimmsnarl in one shot, because with one screen and how bulky it generally is, when you think about, like, in 2022, it was more manageable because Zacian was pretty much a Pokemon you would see very calmly, right? So Zacian had Behemoth Blade. Grimmsnarl couldn't really live it with, even with a Reflect, because old Zacian was just as good, unless you had Babiri Berry or Focus Ash, which then you don't have the screens for 8 turns, which is a lot weaker. So now that Zacian's weakened and a lot of the restricteds don't really run a move that can one-shot the Grim, it's a lot more consistent in getting both screens up, being able to stick around for like longer than one turn, go for a Thunder Wave as well. So that's the reason why Grimmsnarl has just been more popular, I guess, in this format, especially compared to Reg G, because in Reg G, like, Grimmsnarl, like, Miraidon was used by Joe, but like otherwise, like, you still had a lot of Urshifus out there. The support wasn't really worth it. Like, the screens only affected like one restricted Pokemon, which wasn't as bad to deal with compared to like having 2 and just a high amount of damage you could have in the format. So having a way just to have like your restricted Pokemon be able to tank hits and then fire back their heavy damage is really key in some cases, and that's just what allows Grimmsnarl to really shine here, just because it has pretty good natural bulk with its typing, and can usually get both screens up with support. Thunder Wave, of course, can be really annoying for some teams as well, and then you also have like decent damage with Spear Break or Foul Play. So Grimmsnarl is a thing that is just probably going to stick around this format until we find answers. And yeah, we could find answers for sure. I think the final note I'll probably leave off on, because it's a super long episode, as I mentioned before, is there is probably some things that can maybe be popularized later on. I do think that the ground types, even like Groudon, for instance, Landorus, Ursaluna, Pokemon that are immune to Thunder Wave, so you can threaten the Grimmsnarl. I think just in general, we're probably going to see a lot of teams still run Grimmsnarl with formats, or you're going to see maybe like some slight text like that Brick Break we saw, maybe some Psychic Fang stuff that's able to get through screen so you can actually dish out more damage, which I think you kind of need in this format, because just Grimmsnarl can be really annoying and you don't really want to play those luck factors when dealing with Thunder Wave stuff. So could see more of Steel Restricteds coming out just to threaten the Grimmsnarl for heavy damage. Eternatus with Sludge Bomb could also be a thing. You still have to worry. I do think Eternatus Grimmsnarl is actually pretty good. Just threatening the Sludge Bomb against opposing Grimmsnarls can be great with Spirit Break. But in general, yeah, it's just Grimmsnarl is a really hard Pokemon. Maybe we could see like Solgaleo, Necrozma, Dustmane with their Psychic Fangs, the Sunsteel Strike to threaten the Grimmsnarl. Maybe more Zacians come out in general, but yeah, I'd probably say that Grimmsnarl is going to be more harder because those tools are more niche towards Grimmsnarl, and you probably don't want to use your restricted. But I could definitely see a few rise of just like the steel types in general, because I don't think Necrozma, Dustmane, or Solgaleo are like terrible Pokemon, and I think Zacian, like, it's a lot weaker than it used to be, but it's good into the Zacian Grim lead with the right pair, especially if you're like Terra Ground or Terra Electric to be immune to Thunder Wave, and you could punish with like Behemoth Blade and Play Rough. So I could see those sets maybe rising, but otherwise, yeah, like Stealer Screens, Thunder Wave. It's also another reason why Galarian Weezing kind of picked up, right? Because you have the Neutralizing Gas, which shuts down the Grimmsnarl. Then you have Taunt on the Galarian Weezing to prevent it from getting the screens up and being a lot less annoying with its Thunder Wave. I think Taunt will probably come up in general more often, just because of like how annoying Grimmsnarl is, especially because you don't want to deal with both screens for 8 turns throughout a battle where the opposing restricteds are just doing a ton of damage. So I do expect to see more Taunt in the format. I do expect maybe some more things that can just be able to deal with screens, and yeah, that's what I would probably expect. Maybe even more Terras, like Terra Dark and Terra Electric, just to deal with Thunder Wave and Miraidon stuff, because that is just not a fun combo to see. But my voice is pretty much done. I do not think I could really talk for much longer. We have done like a I don't know after how much the raw footage is, but I think this is probably about 2 hours, maybe a bit over 2 hours that we have covered 8 tournaments, or is it 9? I think it's 9 tournaments for the first 3 weeks of Regulation G. If I had waited till the end of the month to do this like I wanted to, this was going to be like a 3-hour episode. So gladly here to cut it off, but that's basically what happened in the first 3 weeks of Regulation I. It has been a very, very action-packed last couple of weeks, and I'll be going over probably the next round after the final regional / special event, which I think is like the first week of June, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll be back there. Let's see if any of my takes are correct, but basically that's the explanation of how the meta has progressed so far. And again, this is the Baekfast Club. Let me know if you have watched all the way here to the end of the episode. And again, be sure to leave your feedback and leave a like down below if you've enjoyed this kind of series, because it is experimental. I might not do it again. Maybe we won't even have a next episode. If this video flops, I probably won't. Also, I have taken note on, like, some of you have asked for like a Spotify potential or like something podcast site related, but I'm not too sure yet. Main reason is I'd look into it, but the thing is, if this is like the last episode of the podcast because people have not been interested, like there's gonna be there's no point of like uploading on a podcast thing if I'm not even sure if this is gonna be a long-term series, right? So that's why you got to leave your feedback. That's why you got to leave your comments. That's why you got to leave a like to support the series, because I don't know if people are interested. Like, first episode usually will always have interest, but I don't know if it will continue to stick around. So make sure you let me know in those stuff down below. And again, let me know what you've had for breakfast. I haven't eaten. I'm probably going to eat after this. Let me know, and I'll catch y'all next time. Because I'm just too tired to talk anymore.